Roll call, please, Ms. Zavada.
Ms. Applegate?
Here.
Ms. Kenworthy?
Here.
Ms. Parker?
Here.
Ms. Reed?
Here.
Dr. Varda?
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve today's meeting agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as provided in board docs.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for today's meeting of January 8, 2025 as presented. Roll call, please, Ms. Zavada.
Ms. Applegate?
Yes.
Ms. Kenworthy?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Dr. Varda?
The agenda is approved. At our December 19th meeting, we studied the following topics: an update from the Equity Accountability Committee and an update on the district's capital improvement program. The public can watch the recording to learn more about these programs. You can also visit our board page on the Jeffco Public Schools website. There you'll find a host of information and links to both board docs and our live stream platforms. Before we move to our study session agenda, I want to acknowledge that a majority of the board attended a board retreat yesterday that was led by our colleague, Director Reed, and I'm going to ask Director Reed to provide a brief summary of that retreat now. So I'll pass it to you, Director Reed.
Thank you, President Parker. Yesterday, we had a board retreat. It was attended by the public and some of the media. It was an opportunity for the very first time since December 19th for us to even begin to process as a board the crisis that we faced with the search warrant that was served on our chief of schools and his subsequent death. And so it was an opportunity for us to talk to each other and for the community to hear our thoughts and our feelings around these events. And then at the end, we had some action items that we determined that we would be working on in the near future. One of them is working on producing more timely communication. That was something that we felt had not gone well and that we want to be able to fix in the future. We felt a need to establish more clear protocols for crises in general for the board to follow. We have asked for a study session on student safety that specifically addresses child sexual predatory behavior, essentially. And, what are our policies for screening our employees, and what are we teaching our children about how to keep themselves safe? What are we doing to train our employees to recognize behavior when adults are crossing boundaries? We've asked for the district to call in experts to help advise us on this so that ultimately we can review our policies and consider any possible changes that we might make to ensure that our children are safer.
Thank you for that, Director Reed. Now we will proceed to our study session agenda. Our first topic for study this evening is a presentation on updates to the district medical benefits request for proposals, or RFP. Yearly, Jeffco provides benefits as part of its total rewards program to approximately 12,000 employees. The district works with its association partners representing employee groups annually to come to a recommendation for plan design changes. This year, the Benefits Advisory Committee recommended Jeffco undertake a request for proposal process, or an RFP, to identify innovation options for employee health insurance. The district typically solicits new proposals for medical insurance every 5 years, with the last RFP taking place in 2019. Before I hand it off to Ms. Parazio, Superintendent Dorland, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, President Parker. Ms. Prazio, thank you for being here. I'm going to just go ahead and get straight to it and let you take it from here.
Good evening, President Parker and Board of Directors and Superintendent Dorland. My name is Amanda Perazio. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer here in Jeffco, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Adam Barnett, our Executive Director of Total Rewards, and Christina Diaz-Baleta, who is our Manager of Benefits. This evening, they're going to walk you through a presentation to provide for you an overview of our request for proposal and where our Benefits Advisory Committee currently is around decision-making and pushing forward a proposal for next steps. And so without anything additional, I will go ahead and turn it over to Adam.
Thank you, Amanda. We appreciate the opportunity to present to the board and Superintendent Dorland today as one of the first presenters of the year. So thank you very much. As we've discussed before, we are at a point where we're ready to make a recommendation to you in regards to moving forward with health insurance providers for 7/1/2025. Just as an executive summary, the Benefits Advisory Committee, made up of representatives across the district from all three of our unions or all three of our associations, recommended that we do a medical RFP this year. Our goal is to explore innovative solutions and cost containment and improve our health. This usually happens every 5 years. The last time we did it, it was in 2019. So we're up for another RFP. This RFP is really triggered by some of our current challenges with health insurance, one being escalating costs. We are seeing double-digit medical and prescription trends. Inflation is hitting our health insurance just like it's hitting a lot of our other expenses, and it's driving up our insurance premiums. It's increasing our pressure on both our employees and their costs for health insurance, as well as our district budget. Our employees have expressed some dissatisfaction with our current plans, mainly just the movement that's going on within the health insurance industry, and Aetna has dropped some of our health networks that a lot of our employees had doctors with. So that really highlighted the action to do this RFP. We also are committed to improvement. We are looking to provide the best benefits at the lowest possible price, and we want to enhance our employee satisfaction. So within this RFP, we had 7 volunteers, employee volunteers that represented JCEA, JCEA, and JESPA. Their role was to review all of the proposals that came in and really spent their valuable time assessing those and coming up with the recommendation that we're presenting today. The Benefits Advisory Council was supportive of this, and they did a survey back in May that helped inform our current levels of satisfaction and our opportunities of improvement as identified by our employees. We kept the BAC informed throughout the RFP process, and the BAC also provided feedback to our evaluators throughout the process as well. Lockton is our benefits consultant here at Jeffco, and they helped guide us through the process, helped us with some of the terminology and understanding of what was coming through the proposals, and they helped us analyze and provide cost projections. They will also assist with any sort of implementation we're going to do over the next 6 months. We also work closely with procurement, human resources, and the strategic initiatives teams to facilitate a valid and thorough RFP process and provide updates to those that needed it. We come to you today to the study session with the recommendation. So just as a summary, we received 5 proposals from Kaiser, Aetna, Cigna, Anthem, and UHC. They were all qualified proposals and were reviewed by our evaluators. Our recommendation is to renew our Kaiser plans and replace Aetna with United Healthcare /Surest. Just as a little summary of the two providers, Kaiser, we estimate roughly $57 million of spend in year 1. Our total cost for health insurance will go up on the Kaiser side by 6.11%. That is the employee plus the employer portion. That's the full cost of health insurance. Will go up by 6.11 effective 7/1. This is a fully insured plan, so we also have a self-funded option for our employees. That's the United side, but Kaiser is a fully insured plan. We won't see any disruption. Our current Kaiser members can see their same doctors. There's no change in the network. And we also plan on no plan changes. We currently offer a $1,500 deductible DHMO, a $2,500 high deductible health plan, and a $4,000 high deductible health plan. This is a year-to-year contract, so we'll be bringing the contracts to you each year in March. The United Healthcare / Surest proposal is to replace Aetna. We're estimating the spend on that to be roughly $25 to $27 million each year. This is lower than our Aetna offer, and it is our lowest price that came in from all of the proposals. It is a self-funded plan, and we're estimating roughly 6 to 11% increases to premium rates. So just like Kaiser received a 6% increase, we expect at least a 6% increase to our costs on the United side. We also plan to introduce the Surest plan, and I'll have Christina go over more detail of that plan on the next slide. One of the benefits of this United proposal is that we have a larger network. Currently with Aetna, we have a narrow network, and with UHC, we're going to expand that network to their larger UHC Choice Plus broad network. So that will open up more doctors and more access. We see little disruption, as less than 1% of the doctors in the Aetna network will be in the UHC network. It will be offered alongside Kaiser on a year-to-year contract, and we'll be bringing to you the contract in March. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Christina to help explain Surest.
Hey, Mr. Barnett, can I
Yes.
ask you a quick question that I think will be helpful context? I want to make a statement, but then after I'm done, I'm hoping maybe you can just, for our board and our listening public and our audience, explain the difference between a fully insured and a self-funded model. I think that would be helpful. And before he does that, I do want to just note, I know one of the things we are struggling with right now is our employees' reaction to the cost increases of insurance. And you'll notice in the bullet points here that we still are expecting 6.11% increase in premiums for Kaiser, and somewhere an estimated between 6 and 11% increase in premium rates on the United Healthcare proposal. What the RFP is doing is basically keeping us from being at double-digit increase rates on Kaiser, and upwards of 12 to 15%, I would say, as typical in terms of when I speak with other superintendent colleagues and other leaders of larger organizations around town. People are seeing much higher increase rates than what we're seeing here. The RFP, I think, is allowing us to minimize our increases, but it is not allowing us, or anyone for that matter, as we all know, as health insurance consumers, to reduce our rates. It's just not happening at all in the medical insurance arena right now. So I just wanted to highlight that so it's transparent and you all know that that's an important component of this. And will be as we all move forward with the board's budget planning for next fiscal year. Can you go back to and just explain fully insured versus self-funded? Thanks.
Sure. Kaiser, we're going into a fully insured relationship with Kaiser, and Kaiser, except for a small number of employers, offers a fully insured for the majority of their client base. Fully insured means that we're paying a fee per employee or per member that's flat, and that's how much we can expect for that member throughout the year. It's around, I'd say $600, $700 for that employee-only HMO cost. We pay that. It's flat. There's no real surprises. The only fluctuation in cost is our enrollment in that Kaiser plan. If that enrollment in Kaiser goes up, then our cost for Kaiser goes up for the year. Self-funded is a little more complicated. We're paying UHC a admin fee that's pretty low. It's around $40 to $50. per employee. On top of that, we are paying for the claims. So UHC is going to send to us a list of all claims. For example, birth of a baby, all those claims we are paying directly to the physician or whoever's doing that procedure. So we're taking on more risk in a self-funded plan. There's also more fluctuation. Really, what we're attempting to do is reduce costs of those claims as they come in on that self-funded side. With a self-funded plan, we also have some risk mitigation through a stop-loss plan that any claim that comes in over $250,000 we'll only have to pay $250,000, and then the stop loss will cover above that. So there is some mitigation of risk, but in general, we're making a play that we believe that we can have a healthy employee base, and that we can maintain that healthy population, and with that will come less costs with our claims. So hopefully that helps.
As a follow-up to that, does that mean that we are the ones who are deciding whether to deny or accept a claim?
We have a contract set up with UHC, or we will have that contract. We have that currently in place with that. That outlines what should be denied and what should be approved. So we will ensure that the contract is followed with UHC as it comes up.
Okay, but the bottom line is when we're self-funded, we are the final arbiters of whether a claim is accepted or not?
We will, if there is anything that's out of line with how it's set up in the contract, we'll make sure that we're following the contract. We would have some ability to approve a claim that may be denied if necessary, but our role within the benefits department is ensure that we're following the contracts in which we set up with these providers.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to...
Hi, good evening. My name is Christina Despaletta, and I'm the Employee Benefits Manager for the district. It's very nice to be with you all this evening. And I'm going to go over the details of the award that we're recommending with United Healthcare. When we went, as an evaluator, when we went into the RFP process and we reviewed the proposals, we referenced the employee survey that we issued back in May to make sure that the employee voice was included in the evaluation process. Out of those surveys, we received a lot of feedback that employees wanted better costs, number one, and they also wanted better behavioral health benefits as well. And they wanted choice, most importantly. They liked the ability to choose between Kaiser and Aetna today. There's folks that like Kaiser today, and there's folks that would like an alternative as well. So we wanted to make sure that as we reviewed the proposals, that we honored the employee voice and what we received out of the surveys. So the proposal that was differentiated from the rest was United Healthcare, and specifically their product called Surest. Out of the other proposals that we received, we didn't receive a lot of innovative cost containment solutions in the other proposals. Surest stood out from the other proposals in the fact that it is a type of plan design that helps employees choose providers that are more efficient with their care and higher performing providers as well. So we believe that the Surest product will curb our medical trend increases year over year. What this plan is that it offers 0 deductibles. So employees do not have to meet any deductible before they receive care. And they also just pay a flat copay, and the copay is transparent and upfront, and it's all inclusive, meaning that the employee pays that flat fee up front, and every service they receive at that visit is covered under that copay. There's no surprise bills after their visit, and they can choose which provider they want to see up front in an app based on cost or availability or travel time or things like that. So employees have a choice on what provider they want to see, and it's included in UHC's broad network as well. So we feel that employees will have access to many more providers than they do today on the Aetna plan. And this was, again, one of the things that we heard loud and clear from the employee surveys, is that employees were currently frustrated with the narrow network that we have today with Aetna. So the Surest proposal addresses both the access issues that employees are facing by broadening the provider network and providing a cheaper solution for employees when they go visit doctors and receive care. Also, United Healthcare also stood out because they are one of the primary healthcare carriers for many of the K through 12 districts in Colorado. It's a popular health insurance carrier among K through 12. And then they also had the most robust mental health supports as well. liveandworkwell.com is a website that can be previewed before a member enrolls. It is one of the most comprehensive mental health support systems that we found. You can employees are able to connect with their mental health providers, find a mental health provider, as well as have access to self-study, some self-work resources as well to help support their mental health. So there's a lot of great resources on liveandworkwell.com. And so for these reasons, we felt that the Surest proposal stood out as the strongest that we received.
Thank you, Christina. So with our timeline, we've discussed this a bit in our key initiatives meeting. Today we have our study session on the 16th. The Board of Education will vote to approve or reject the RFP award. Coming up, we'll start our communications with staff in January and begin planning out implementation. February through March, we'll work with IT to finalize our integrations with them and provide full rates and communicate those out. We don't know the district contribution yet. That will be determined during the negotiation process, which I believe starts in early February with Amanda here. And April open enrollment open enrollment communications start in April. May open enrollment starts, and July 1st is when the plan year begins. So just wanted to give you that timeline moving forward. So that's the end of our presentations. Do you have any questions for us?
Board members, questions?
Thank you. We've talked about this, I think, every single year during this presentation. At the company that I run, we pay a % of the employees' benefits. So I just want to clarify, unless something is negotiated differently, the cost increase that Superintendent Dorland mentioned is completely 100% absorbed by the employee, correct?
Well, at this point, yes, until our negotiation process completes. One thing that I'd say that we're doing this year is we have put out a 10-question survey, some of those questions pertaining to PTO, sick time, and personal time. But we also asked some hard questions of our employees, asking them if they had $1, would they put it towards compensation? Would they put it towards benefits? Do they want more money to go towards dependents, or does it make sense to do our current model, which is really a flat dollar? We also asked the question of percentage model. Would you like to see more of a percentage model, or would you like our current, contribution style? So we will definitely have those results soon. I think January 17th is when we'll be able to receive those results, and those will help to inform negotiations as a voice of our employees. So we'll have more data going into negotiations on that.
And the other thing we've talked extensively about is the % that we cover of dependents and how the district has not been able to keep up with other industries and competitors of who might employ our staff. Can you remind me, because I don't remember, what % we pay of our dependents coverage for employees?
I have, in the presentation, we do have a slide. I don't know if the competitive information in there as well. We are tracking and benchmarking against other districts to make sure that we're competitive. Just like compensation, we want to make sure that we're not, we'd like to lead, but in a lot of cases we're not leading. But we want to make sure we're also not lagging when it comes to our benefit costs. Right now, when you do that analysis, we are relatively in the middle of other school districts or competitive districts when it comes to those costs for family coverage as well as employee coverage. I think we want to hear more from our employees, and that's really what the survey is about. And hopefully, we'll learn more. As of right now, 640 is what employees get. All employees get 640, whether they take employee plus family or employee only. It's been that way for a long time. So we are continuing to explore if we need to change that contribution strategy.
Sorry, and I truly have forgotten. Do you mean there's no coverage for dependents?
There is coverage for dependents that you could elect employee plus child, employee plus spouse, or employee plus family. But we're giving $640 whether you elect employee only or employee plus family. So
sorry, I'm so unclear. How much do we cover for dependents?
So dependents, you get $640 towards the total cost for dependent coverage as well. So there is no additional funding that we're providing towards dependents.
Okay, I didn't realize that, I guess. Thank you.
I'll just add that's how it works in many different districts. Employees get sort of a dollar amount contribution per month, and then they use that dollar amount contribution toward whatever plan is they need or want. And I do think that's the feedback we've heard from our employees with families saying, I can use this $640 to cover my insurance, but then I have nothing left to cover the insurance of my family. So that's a concern that we've been hearing. It's an obvious concern, and that's some of I believe there are questions in the survey now related to that concern, and questions around, do we want to add more for family coverage so that some of those dependent costs are somewhat covered? Amanda, do you want to add?
Yeah, previously, before we increased our employer contribution to $640 last year, we had one option that was employee only that was 100% covered. We now, with the increase to $640 per month per employee, have four different plans, not three different plans that are employee only. So employee only coverage now has expanded to having three different options instead of previously having only one high deductible health plan. And I believe it was only the Kaiser plan. It was 100% covered before we increased that employer contribution last year. So we have gained some ground in our employee only coverage and the ability to have additional choices. Also, there is a small portion, very small portion of the $640 employer contribution remaining if the employer were to choose the plan that is the least expensive per month. So they have an additional approximately $100 that they could potentially put toward either they can choose to put it toward an HSA plan, or they can choose to put it toward their family coverage or their spousal coverage as well.
That low cost plan is the high deductible plan that their children would also be on a high deductible plan.
That is correct.
Thank you for this. I know I was looking at the appendix slide. That was very helpful. It answered some of my questions. Do we know, so I know we had the survey last May that helped to inform some of this. Do we know what level of participation we had in that survey?
We had over 20% of our employees filling it out. I think it's close to 21% filling out the survey.
That's pretty good.
Was that right?
As of the last update, I believe it was around 20%. However, the survey closes on Friday, so it may increase.
The original survey.
Oh, I'm sorry. The original survey in May was about 7.5% response rate. The current survey, I believe, has surpassed that, and it closes on Friday.
And that was, you answered my next question, which was going to be, how is this one looking? Because I think this is really important. In the survey now, are we asking why people may, because if 73% of our employees are doing employee only, are we asking why that is? Okay.
there are a lot of options out there, and we've asked our employees to be consumers for years. TRICARE, Medicare, Medicaid, as well as a lot of our employees are on their spouse's plan. So those are some of the reasons why people do not take our benefits or put their dependents on their spouse's plan.
Okay. I think that's all really helpful information. Will the board see the results of the survey going on now?
We'll be happy to.
I'd love to see that. I'd be fascinated to see it. And then last question. I know we had a really good committee of folks across kind of the spectrum participate in this. Was this kind of a unanimous decision to go with these plans?
Yes, it was. There was much discussion. We had a rigorous scorecard, which we applied scores to each of the proposals, and it was United Healthcare Surest stood out significantly from the other proposals. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I think Director Applegate and Dr. Varda, excuse me, have asked a lot of the questions that are on my list. I think I want clarification on two things. One is the surest plan that's going to be offered. I just really want to make sure I understand. Is that an employee-only option? Is that a dependent?
It covers families. So it's not an employee-only option. You could think of it as a different type of plan design, similar to what we have today. Like we have an HDHP and we have a DHMO. Surest is just another option. It's another way of structuring the employee's costs and is simplifying the employee's costs as well. But yes, to answer your question, it covers all family levels.
Thank you. And my other question relates to what Director Parker asked earlier. Around our approval of care for some of those plans. I'm going to ask this publicly. Would we be in a position of having to have a discussion about approving gender-affirming care for people that work in the district?
So we usually bring that up when it becomes a state mandate, or it becomes an option to add to our plans. I believe we had some conversation before I was here 2 or 3 years ago, and I believe Kaiser is currently covering elements of that. Whether it's full or not, we could look deeper, and we'll provide you some information about what's covered currently in our Kaiser plan. Self-funded, there's a little bit more room for how we want to set that up, and we can work with you on that as well. So we'll just provide you more information in the Friday information.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Just a couple more. I am very familiar with the employee coverage versus the family coverage, since I have 2 daughters who are teachers. Is this pretty standard, do you think, around districts, that there's very good coverage if you're just asking for yourself? You don't have to pay the premium. Is that something that other districts offer?
Some districts have moved to a subsidy for dependents for the reason of what Dr. Varda brought up was that family insurance is much more expensive than employee only, and here it can be up to $1,300 per month, and so a lot of districts have implemented some sort of subsidy towards their dependents, which is something that we would look at as well.
And so maybe during negotiations or something, that's a topic.
Yeah, a lot of the survey is going to help inform that, whether or not our employees are asking for it. And we look at funding, really it's a trade-off of, the questions, would you like employee only to go up from 640 to 650, or would you like the dependent coverage? Would you like more money to go towards dependents? So with 73% of our staff currently on employee only, we'll see how that question pans out. But we'd like to hear more from our employees on what they'd like to do, because there is a trend and there is interest in providing more money towards families, and we'll be reviewing that again this year.
Okay, thanks. And also, in your appendix information, it talks about the total staff of 14,537 and eligible for benefits is 10,478. Is that mainly due to the what percentage of time they're working, whether they're full-time or not?
That's correct. Yes. So the 10,000 is going to be the full-time employees, which is at least 30 hours per week, 0.75 FTE, except for in the instance of JCEA, which is 0.6 or above. So yes,
Just what, 0.6?
0.6 or above. Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And also, you said that we kind of are on a cycle every 5 years to go out for an RFP, and yet the contracts are just for 1 year. Is that correct? What would happen if at the end of a year there was some decision made to not renew a contract and we haven't got do we go back to offers from the RFP the last time we went out, or what would we do?
Yeah, I mean, if, for example, we're hearing around this time that rates on July 1st are going to go up by 30-40%, we would likely do a quick RFP and gather information to see if we need to make a quick change. And so there is that option. There's also the option that we would move with only one of the two medical providers that we have right now. So next year, if one of them's going way up and we're like, look, we're not interested in continuing with them because of their price, we can shift everyone to the other provider, and we can also do a quick RFP if necessary.
I will say it's my understanding that to switch from Kaiser to or from is pretty significant because they have their own very self-contained.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say roughly 75% of our staff is on Kaiser. And so if Kaiser's rates went up significantly to a point where we may have to drop them, we would really have to, evaluate the impact and the disruption that it would have on our employees.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. Sorry, the timeline gave me a different thought. We will be negotiating the amount that the employer will contribute, but we are also going to open enrollment in May. What if we haven't? Negotiations are going to go amazing, I know, but if they're not done when we open enrollment, how do we manage that?
That happened last year.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of our employees had already elected their benefits. And what that did was it changed the contribution that they had already agreed to. We gave them a very short window to be able to go in and turn around and make any adjustments that they wanted to make after we finished that negotiation with my good friends behind me at 2:30 in the morning. It worked. It was really challenging. I would say that for our benefits and our IT and payroll, it was extremely challenging to adjust from 0.75 to 0.6 employees. That was probably the biggest challenge, and it was a quick turnaround. However, they worked their tails off to get it done and make sure that our employees got what they need. And so we did make it happen. That is not ideal. That is not our intention, and that is not our hope moving forward. We are going to start a benefits negotiations process earlier this year, and we are going to begin that in February. And our intent during that is not necessarily to be able to negotiate the cost of the employer contribution and the employee cost. It is to negotiate the structure of the benefits. So whether we want to move to a tiered model where, to Dr. Varda's point, potentially having a tiered model where we increase contribution if you have self plus spouse plus dependents, a family plan, or just self plus spouse versus employee only. So we'll have a conversation around that structure beginning in February.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys very much. Appreciate that. For the next agenda item, I'm pleased to welcome the Jefferson County Education Association, or JCEA. I will say that we have scheduled about an hour for this presentation, and after that, we will be taking about a 5-minute break. But before I hand this off to Ms. Williams, JCEA President, to introduce her board, Superintendent Dorland, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, President Parker. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I know the board looks forward to hearing from you. And I don't know, Ms. Malis, am I handing this to you, or Ms. Williams, am I handing this over to you? I'm handing it over to Ms. Williams. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
To plug into my computer for the presentation.
It is on, is it on Board Docs? Is this not it?
Yeah, that's it, but then I can't click unless you want to do all the clicking. Yeah, Drew.
Oh, I think we have a...
Does this clicker work for it? Yeah, that one. Okay. All right. Well, I had my own just because I was prepared this time. All right. Well, thanks. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for having us. We always look forward to this every year. And our board has worked very hard to prepare for you this evening. So we met till late last night and to gather information in the last month. So, and over throughout the year. So for those of you in the audience or watching these QR codes or the bit.ly, you can access the presentation as well if you don't want to get on Board Docs. So these are the members of our executive committee and our board of directors. So those are our action team chairs, and each action team and what they're responsible for. So that is how our board is made up. And as each member goes tonight, they can introduce themselves. Tonight's topics are the state of Jeffco report from JCEA and the findings from our most recent survey. Bargaining, we're going to be discussing bargaining, and we will talk about benefits and with the date that we're officially negotiating those as well. Our ethnic minority outreach action team update. We're going to also talk about our Colorado Gives Day, the JCEA Excellence Fund, and our Sue Ann Berger scholarships, and also our Dave Sanders scholarship. We'll talk about our political action wins from last year and just some of our goals for this year from our political action team chair. And we'll also talk about professional practices and new educator supports that we are offering for our new educators. And then when we wrap up, we will leave it open for questions and discussions with the board. So, all right. So we'll start with our original state of Jeffco report from JCEA and their key findings. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Michelle Malis.
Oh yeah, I guess I should. Where do I point it at?
Just right there.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and advance a slide. Hello. Thank you so much, directors of the school board and Superintendent Dorland, for having us here this evening to share some of our work with JCEA with you, and to keep you guys informed, and also to be open to questions that you may have about our presentation. I'd also like to extend a big thank you to Amanda Parazio and to her entire team for it's been really great to collaborate with them over the last couple of years during bargaining, and I think we've done some really good work together, and we've made a lot of gains in our contract, and we're proud of that work. So I thank them and their team as well. And so to begin with some of our survey data, as we know, mental health is an issue, a concern, not just with our students, but also with our staff. And from some of our feedback, there was a concern about our employee assistance program. 89% shared with us that they really wanted to retain that. It is a benefit to educators, and a number of our people can attest to how helpful it's been when doing the tough work that we're doing. A lot of us take it home with us, and it's important to have this to help us process that. And they're very concerned about it being eroded further. This is something which our employees have access to counselors that are aware of what's going on within the district, and it's also free of charge for them. And a number of our employees simply would not have the financial wherewithal to pay for this care outside of this program. And so it's something that's of great benefit. And I would also add that it's a benefit to the district because it helps our educators to deal with burnout and also with turnover. And lost staff indicates lost dollars from trainings that we're having to then recruit and retrain. And so if we can help our teachers and give them this support, they've indicated that that is a priority. And so I just wanted to share that finding with you guys as well. Another issue, and again, the survey data we got back, it's kind of a mixture of like glows and grows. And so a lot of it was, this is going well, and here's where we need more work. And so one of these areas is with student discipline and safety within the schools. And the glow here is that our educators told us that they were much more than in the past aware of and using the district discipline matrix. In the past, they were like, I don't know what that is. And now they're like, oh yeah, we know what that is when we're using it. But there is concern still around student and staff safety. There's still some incidents that are happening, and they want more training and more support in this area. And one of those areas was the P&I manual, which is prevention and intervention manual. And a lot of them said that they had not yet. It's supposed to be something that each school works on to develop for their particular population. And a lot of them had not done that work. 50% said they didn't even know what it was. And so it's one of those things where we just need to do more work. It's within the contract. They're supposed to be getting trainings at least twice a year. And it sounds like either that's not being intentionally done, or that our staff aren't aware of it. But I think that knowing what that is, it would help them to feel better about, okay, I know I've got resources when things like that occur. So that's an area for growth. I also want to highlight and thank Patrick Simpson and his work on our, and also all of the representatives from activities and sponsors and coaches that worked on their new schedule. This is a huge deal. It's really helped us to become more competitive with other districts. It was long overdue, and the work that they did on that was really helpful. A lot of coaches and activity sponsors have told me anecdotally that that's really been helpful, particularly in our arts. The theater have come to me and said, this is amazing. I'm actually able to have capacity to put on the performance I want to put on. And so this is huge, and we're very proud of that. However, there's still a few areas. It's supposed to be a 3-year rollout, and so we would be heading into year 2, and I'm excited to see where we're going to go next. The areas that have come up so far are CTE teachers, and that we need to do some work because they do a ton of hours outside of the school day, and it's a really important real life career experience. And so we're hoping to get continue our work on that. So I'm excited to I'm looking forward to that work. All right, move on to the next page. So the next issue, which I'm going to kind of talk about in 2 different slides, is workload. As always, this continues to come up in every survey. The job is really hard, and it just gets harder every year. It feels that every year more and more things are added to the plate, and I'm like, we got to take something off at some point, or else I can't do all of this justice. So we need to acknowledge that when we have so many different priorities, none of them can truly be a priority. I can't focus 100% of attention on 37 different things. And so our respondents told us 21% said, hey, workload's going really well for me. Okay, so then what that means is 79% are like, yeah, I'm struggling. A majority said they're working time outside of the school day, but it's up to 10 hours plus over the course of a week, which is a lot. You know, they're approaching burnout. And 45% cite their workload and caseload class size as a significant problem. Every year we're seeing new initiatives and workload added to the plates. And our non-contact days that we bargained last year have been a net benefit. Those have been really helpful, like almost like I can stop and I can breathe and I can have time to have conversations and work with my colleagues. So that has been very helpful. So we thank the district for working with us on that. However, we still need to be looking at how much are we asking people to do, and can they really do all of that with fidelity and up to the level that we want? And, you know, we need to be thinking about timing and implementation of that, of the new initiatives. 37% were saying that they're exceeding the caseload guidelines. A lot of it's due to staffing shortages. So again, being competitive with in other districts and with other professions. And 86% said they weren't being compensated for this additional workload. So we still have work to do there. And kind of piggybacking off of that, we do have concerns about JCEA, and the BU stands for bargaining unit positions that are being filled by contract employees. And so anecdotally, we've heard that it's happening maybe a little bit less than what it had in the past couple of years, but it's still happening to a degree that we're not being competitive. And we want those positions filled by people that are Team Jeffco, that are part of the community, that are invested in our schools and are going to stay and develop those relationships. And so that is a concern. The last bullet point, I'm going to turn it over to Whitney, and she's also going to be doing the next slide, and then I'll come back after that. So Whitney.
Okay. All right. So this next slide is really around, or this next bullet is concerns around district budgeting being spent on consultants, purchasing packages, resources, and for our current bargaining unit. And one of them is around TNTP. So the Jeffco has spent over $500K on an organization called TNTP. And as we know, nothing can replace the knowledge and the pedagogy that an educator learns throughout their college career. And TNTP takes that away from educators. It really narrows our teaching practices and it narrows our curriculum. It's an organization that comes into our schools and it reforms the schools that aren't doing well. And so a big concern lately has been around the TNTP strategies being placed into our classrooms with no why behind it. And one of those frustrations I've heard a lot is through our look fors, schools that are implementing TNTP, if they're being evaluated, sometimes those strategies are being put onto their evaluations as well right now. So that's one big concern that we've heard around spending money on these consulting companies and then not having a why behind why are we implementing these strategies within our classroom.
Thank you, Whitney. And sort of to continue that idea, if we look, I guess that's me. I gotta advance it. There we go. With these new initiatives, I think that a couple of concerns came up around that. And part of it is that they're overwhelmed by the introduction, how quickly they're being rolled out, and how quickly they feel it's becoming a part of their evaluation. And it's causing a pretty high level of stress with some of our educators. And with that, 92% of our respondents said that with the introduction of new initiatives, they really felt that they wanted their teacher voice involved. They wanted to be involved in implementing these new initiatives. And 97% said, hey, there needs to be a limit to the number in a given time frame. So if we're going to do a new initiative this year, we need to hold on to something till the following year, till we get this under our belt and doing it with fidelity before we move on to another thing. And also decide, is this work or not? Do we need to figure something else out? And I think that, you know, as to what Whitney was saying, a concern is why are we paying so much to these outside consultants and companies? And is there a way to better utilize our in-house talent? Because we got a lot of really talented people in our staff that if you said, hey, can somebody do this particular job or roll out this initiative? There are people that we're already paying within our district that could maybe take that on. And so we want to better utilize those people to harness that talent and personnel to maybe better time and tailor any new initiatives to our educators, and recognizing that sometimes more really is less. And the more that we try to do, we're not making headway in any of the things. And so to really drill down on one thing and give our employees enough time and training and resources to accomplish whatever that goal is, which in our next bullet point, our members did say they did feel that they had the training and the resources for whatever their current position was. They felt good about that. We've made a lot of headway within our contract, but also felt that they lacked the training, time, and resources for anything new coming out. It feels very rushed, and there was a lot of concern. And as always, this is not a surprise. Every year, compensation is a top concern for our employees. We're in a tough state and a tough profession, but 58% have reported. And actually, I want to go back and say that over the last couple of years, I'm really proud of the work that we've done with the district to make improvements, and we have made gains. And those gains were much needed because of the many years that we spent frozen and with stagnant pay, and we were falling behind. And so we have come a long way, and I'm proud of that work. But where we've come to is kind of keeping us at the middle of the pack. We're not always at the end, but we're never near the top. And so we still have work to do. 58% of our respondents reported that with all these new raises, the good news is they could pay their bills. They could meet whatever their bills were. That didn't mean they had anything extra at the end of the month if there were unexpected expenses. that's, I guess, going to go on the credit card or ask, a family member for help. And that's concerning for us. 40% are telling us they're still living paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of respondents in the comments were saying, if I didn't have a spouse with a job outside of education, I would not be able to do this job. And there's a lot of our employees in that position. And that doesn't feel like we're able to attract a wide variety of employees then to our school district. And so that's an area where we're growing, and I'm proud of the work we've done, but we're not done yet. We can't just stop here. We still have work to do. And so I'm looking forward to working on the bargaining season this year on that. So with that, I will turn it over to Richard.
And I'm Richard Sanchez. And yeah, bargaining season is here. So our first bargaining date is January 30th, and we're going to be talking about discussing special education. We have 2 dates in February, the 6th and the 20th, where we're going to be discussing benefits. 2 dates in March, the 6th and the 27th. 3 dates in April with the 3rd, the 17th, and the 24th. And then 3 dates in May. I was super bummed that May the 4th is not going to be one of those dates because that's an infamous day. But May 1st, 8th, and 14th are those dates as well in May where we're going to be bargaining. So we will be delivering our letter of intent to bargain per Article 4 to Amanda Parazio, Dr. Kim LeBlanc Esparza, Jennifer Kimson. JCEA is finalizing which articles to bring to the table. JCEA has not yet heard what articles the district is bringing forward. Some mutuals, though, at this time are leaves, special education, benefits, coaches and sponsors stipends, and compensation.
And of course, we would invite you guys to come to any of our bargaining sessions should you make it. We always appreciate that. All right.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Kelly, the Ethnic Minority Outreach and Action Team Chair. Excuse me. As in my classroom, I'd like to first ground us in the why of the work being done by EMOTE, the AAC, the Office of Community Partnership, Community Engagement, and Key Initiatives, and this board. The slides that I'm sharing, this first one shows achievement data and discrepancies between Black or African American students and Hispanic students and their white peers. And obviously, there are other subgroups that I could have included, some which perform better, some worse. I think you get the point. This is a slide that shows 8th grade CMAS English Language Arts data for 23-24. Again, we see the discrepancy in performance. And finally, this is a graduation rates data, which again shows the end result of those discrepancies. These slides don't share any new information, but highlight the need for our continued work. I know this is not new information, but EMOTE believes that if we are to live up to our responsibility of providing for the common good, then we understand that these results are not because of inadequacies of communities or individual students, but structural inefficiencies and inequities. I read a quote over the break that said something to the effect that when we know something is wrong, then we have a responsibility to do better. And so I would implore each of us to hold one another accountable for doing better. EMOTE is aware that before the break, Tara Pena and Renee Nicodotis made a presentation to the board about the status of the progress of Article 22 in the EAC. We would like to echo much of what was conveyed during that presentation. EMOTE feels as though we're building momentum and making some inroads toward meeting some of the agreements in Article 22. But we also believe that change will only happen when we begin to make organizational changes. I ask you to take a look at this slide that was shared with one of the EAC work groups. And I want you to notice the title and the date. And then on this slide, the priorities of that group. These are laudable goals, but over a decade later, we're still seeking to address many of the same priorities. So, EMOTE knows that good intentions are not enough. We know that, well, we know what they say about the road paved with good intentions. Our ask is that as the recommendations begin to come out of the EAC work groups, some that may require a pecuniary response, that this board continue to support our Jeffco community through the implementation of the agreements in Article 22. Thank you. And I'm turning things over to Elizabeth Kantner.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Kantner. I'm the treasurer of JCEA. I'm also a math teacher at Arvada High School. People haven't been saying that, but it's what I do. JCEA believes strongly in building our community from within. One of the ways we do this is by maintaining and awarding scholarships for recent Jeffco graduates and current teachers. During this past Colorado Gives Day, we raised $5,292 from just over 100 donors for the Excellence Fund. Every year, we award 5 new student recipients continuing scholarships, and then we give 2 teachers a scholarship for their continuing education. This slide sort of highlights those points. And again, the scholarships are continuing, so they receive it for all 4 years of their education. And the Sue Ann Berger scholarship actually increases in their senior year as well.
All right, I didn't introduce myself to begin with, but I'm Whitney Newman. I'm an educator. I teach 3rd grade at Elk Creek Elementary, and I lead the political action team for JCEA. And so last year was a big year for legislation. During our 2024 legislative session, educators worked relentlessly to the successful conclusion of a year-long campaign to eliminate the BS factor. The Educator Safety Task Force was formed to study school safety issues. JCEA members engaged with elected officials, took action at the Capitol and here in Jeffco to remove language for school finance rewrite that could have harmed funding for Jeffco School District. JCEA educators engaged nationally, working with NEA and the state EAs across the country to finally repeal the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision rules that hurt many of our educators and their families. So not only did public education have wins during legislative session, but we had many wins at the ballot box in 2024. This fall, educators phone banked and knocked on doors in our community and across the state to defeat Amendment 80 by more than 50%. We passed Proposition KK, which could raise roughly $39 million a year for programs supporting victims of crime, veterans, and students. JCEA members contacted voters, volunteered, and built a coalition of community members to elect pro-public education legislators across Jeffco. So one of our goals of the political action team for JCEA is that we're committed to raising voices of educators by starting an educator liaison team for legislators and school board members in Jefferson County. We're looking forward to building relationships and working together to make change.
Hi, my name is Katie Cahill. I'm the Professional Practices Action Team Chair, and I teach social studies at Summit Ridge Middle School. As you may know, we have in our negotiated agreement some professional growth funds that are available to educators to attend professional conferences. Last school year, in total, this joint Jeffco and JCEA professional practices funds committee awarded over $40,000. And as of this past November, we have given $25,000 to 56 applicants so far this school year. We have more money to give away, and that was our highest amount of applicants ever. We are looking forward to continuing to grow this program and offer these opportunities to educators.
All right. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Dorland. It's wonderful to see you all as always. I'm Colin Ferraro. I'm a high school English teacher at Wheat Ridge and the chair of the Early Career Educator Action Team for JCEA. The major thing I'd like to point your attention to in regards to my role as the Early Career Educator Action Team chair is a new program that we as JCEA are piloting this year known as JCEA Mentors. One of the major things I've heard over and over and over again from new educators to this district is that they would desire a more robust program to get them ingratiated in the community of Jeffco educators, essentially, right? We know that the induction process does that well, but we also know, it should come as no surprise, that doing that is an intensely complex process, right? Teachers work pretty insularly day to day. It's difficult to find face time with your colleagues and spread new ideas and just garner a sense of camaraderie with your coworker. So what this program is essentially a one-to-one mentor program where we pair a mentor JCEA member with a new educator to the district so they can just learn the ropes, get ingratiated in the community, come to community events and things of that nature. So it really works in three prongs. The first one is inviting them into the community. The second one is supplying them with PD and professional development that they feel is necessary for them. We tailor it to based off the feedback that we hear from those new educators. And the third one is just inspiring them to advocate for themselves because their voice is important. And I'd like to report that so far, it's a pilot year, so there's always kinks to be worked out, but I found it to be quite successful this year, and I've been receiving some really positive feedback from our mentors and obviously our mentees as well. So one quick aside before I wrap up is I just want to extend a personal thanks to Director Applegate. Because last year, her question about what we do as JCEA in order to ingratiate new members into our community was the question that sparked the idea for this program. So thank you very much for that. I'm excited to see how it grows in the future. And that's all from me. Thank you, guys.
All right. So we have reached the question and discussion part of our agenda. But before we move to that, I would also like to invite you all to join us for Grub Club again this year. Grub Club is where we collect items at schools and donate them to the Action Center, as well as monetary donations. So the dates, we kicked off Grub Club on December 10th. So each school is collecting certain items that are assigned to them. And on March 7th and March 8th, we have all of those schools will be bringing those items to our office where we count them, add them up. And so March 7th, we'll be at our office from 3 to 6, and March 8th from 10 to 12. So if you would like to join us and help us count items and deliver them to the Action Center, we would love to have you. So thank you.
Can I just ask one thing about it? You call it Grub Clubs, but it's what kind of items?
So it's there's food items, typically not canned food items, things that you can open without a can opener, because we're collecting items for our emancipated and homeless youth. So it's things that they can warm up in a microwave, but they don't need a can opener to use or to eat. So yeah. And each articulation area is collecting different items. So we can also send you the flyers so that you are aware of what your areas are collecting and can help and assist in that. And Superintendent Dorland and Ms. Director Reed came last year. And I don't know if anybody else came, but they helped us. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. All right, so questions and discussions at this time.
First, I want to thank you all for coming. I just always very much appreciate what JCEA does, and we would not have the great teachers that we have without the work of that organization. So thank you ever so much for everything that you do. I'm going to go ahead and put in the plug for if you can get in to help out with all the stuff for Grub Club. It is a lot of fun. I've done it for a lot of years now, and it feels good. So it is worth doing. Okay, so in terms of questions, on slide 6 where you talked about the workload, I am curious, do we know if that was different depending upon what level they taught? Like, did we find that elementary school teachers were still feeling, we had, I'm looking at this, that 45% said that workload and caseloads were a significant problem. Was that different between elementary and, say, high school, or was that across the board?
Yeah, we didn't disaggregate it in terms of level, so I couldn't really say, but my sense is it's kind of across the board, but it might be different what that workload looks like, whether it be planning, whether it be grading. And then also, of course, with our special educators and SELs, that workload is different as well. And so it's sort of, we didn't disaggregate it.
Okay.
We do have the ability to do that because we did ask them what level they teach, so we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, I would be interested.
We have done that in the past. But
yeah. And it's feedback that I tend to get when, in terms of, I think, perception anyway, that it's feedback I get when I get school visits, kind of who feels like they're not getting the planning time that they need. Although it looks like another big chunk of it really is the staffing issue. Like if we had the adequate staffing, the planning time would be closer to adequate, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also connected to a lot of the new initiatives that have been rolled out.
Okay.
So,
and is that mostly in the schools that are working with TNTP? Or is that all of our schools feeling like they have so many new initiatives that it's overwhelming?
I mean, I can only speak, like I would welcome anybody else to jump in, but it seems like across the board we're all being asked to work on these initiatives, and particularly around, of course, now with the naming your lap, what's it called? Intentional monitoring, the naming, all of that. It seems that that's kind of across the board. We've all gotten PD on it, and this is, again, anecdotal in my sense of things, is it kind of depends on the building that you're in, and that there are administrators that are implementing it with their staff in a way that is realistic. And, hey, we can't ask you to do the whole, we're going to try this out, try some lessons, make it make sense for you. And in other buildings, I don't think it's the administrator's fault per se, but I think maybe they need more training or they don't understand exactly what their role is. And so there are buildings that are telling us like, oh my gosh, I have to do it every day for every lesson. It's in my evaluation, and they're, kind of melting down. So it sort of seems like it's building by building, even though it's across the district. Those are the initiatives.
Sounds like something we can monitor and take a look at. Because I know that one of the things that we've talked about is not adding a lot of new things to plates, given the new curriculum that we've asked people to implement. So if we can, obviously if we're implementing things that are ultimately going to, like sometimes, it's growing pains, right? And you're doing this thing that is difficult now, but it's going to make your job easier later. But sometimes you're just getting a lot of new stuff, and that's
and some confusion about how to implement it, because do I have to make an exemplar for every single thing that I do, and it's taking me forever to do all these exemplars, and so there's a lot of that where it's and again, it's different for a teacher in the beginning of their career as opposed to the middle, as opposed to the end. Like, I'm in year 25, and my exemplars, I know exactly what I'm looking for. And a beginning teacher, some of this stuff is helpful to be like, okay, I do need to do this task to understand how it goes, but and understand how long it will take and what I'm looking for. But and that's kind of a thing that's come up in the past, is that we're asked to differentiate for our students, but some of this we're not always differentiating for educators. And a veteran teacher and a mid-career teacher and a beginning teacher might need different things, and also different timelines for these different initiatives.
And I just wanted to add real quick, with our bargaining survey, I always like to read the comments, and there was an overwhelming like lots of comments left from Title I educators that consistently were saying like, I feel like I'm swimming, I'm drowning. And I think one thing is that they can't even make the lap if they can't, they can't even teach the classroom that they're in. So the Title I education.
Can I piggyback on that really quick? So forgive me, not an education background. Help me understand the initiatives a little better, because one of my questions is what are the new initiatives? And you rattled off some things, and I don't know what any of them are.
Okay, so some of the new initiatives we've been seeing across the district at all levels is naming the lab, having our exemplars that have been brought to our staff meetings and saying that we need to implement these things without a why or understanding the purpose behind them, essentially. So those are the two initiatives that recently have been coming down to the elementary level this past year and last year.
And in the previous year, it was about lesson internalization. And how do I put this? A lot of this they're good concepts and there's good stuff in there. But the way it was addressed in each building, I think, looked very different. For example, we had a PD where we got this document. It was so overwhelming that you had to do this internalization it would take 40 minutes plus to fill this out. And people are like, do I have to do this for every single lesson? Do I have to have this? And depending on the building you're in, there was kind of different messages being given about what the expectation was. And I'm telling you, there's no way as a teacher that I would be able to fill out that document for every lesson. I've got 4 preps. It's just not going to happen. But there's things that you can pull out of there. You're like, okay, I do want to consider that and think about it. So I think it's about the expectation about how it's being implemented, and how does that get reflected then on an evaluation, and how much stress, how much time is this putting on our educators? And again, I think it's we're getting a lot of comments saying they're overwhelmed, but it's kind of building by building as opposed to level by level, and so.
And to piggyback, these are classroom strategies. They're not strategies that are within our curriculum that we already have.
And that's what comes up a lot around the comments as well is our educators, they get into education and into the subject they teach or the level they teach because they're passionate about it. And they've got fun ideas and lessons that they want to teach that address the curriculum, but it might be different than what their neighbor who's passionate about it and is going to address it a different way. And what comes up is I like all this stuff, but I want to be able, like a grocery store, I'm going to go down the row and pick and choose of the good stuff that I want to use to create this lesson that meets the curriculum for that unit, right? As opposed to, oh, you have to do it this way in this order and fill out this document every single day. And that's where teachers kind of get overwhelmed and like, wait, why am I doing this again? Like, what's this? This isn't making me a better teacher. It's taking time away from what I'm doing to fill out some document or make sure I, have my clipboard.
I also just want to put out there that one of the things that I have personally seen and that people have come to me about when it comes to these initiatives also lands within the pool of, I completely am starting to lose my train of thought. When we don't have the experience as like someone who has been in the classroom for 20 years, those kind of things, as someone who's been in there kind of that middle ground, we are getting these bits and pieces that are also never kind of carrying through. And so it feels like 1 year it's, oh, this is the new special thing that we want you to focus on. And then it's like, okay, so you kind of start to get it and you're like kind of starting to get the pieces into the classroom. And then suddenly it's like, okay, but now we want you to look at this piece. And there's pieces that contradict each other, but there's pieces that kind of play along. And so especially for our new teachers, they're sitting there going, okay, so 1 year it's this, 1 year it's this. How do I put these together? And they're already sitting there going, I don't even have enough time to plan or to grade or to be ready for my students to come in the next day, let alone try and figure out 1 year to the next, kind of is how it's felt the last couple of years from what I've heard.
Mary, can I ask one question? One of the things that I know we've worked on really closely together is shared leadership structures at the school level. And so the good news is some of what you're sharing tonight, I also hear when I go into buildings and we're saying to principals, both both as in large group as well as in one-on-one and small group when we work with them, you have to work with your staff and begin where their readiness is for certain things. And really the practices or initiatives that you all are talking about are best practice in terms of pedagogy, in terms of how you implement teaching in a classroom with the resources that have been provided, right? And people are at different places in terms of their ability to do that. And we know that, and we want our principals to be working with their staff to do this in a pace, in a way that is supportive. So I guess one of the questions that I'm curious about, it related to this teaching and learning kind of focus, as well as the P&I and discipline comments that you were talking about earlier. How is it going with the ALT structures and the OLT structures in some of the discipline? I can't remember the name of the discipline groups that we also put in place. PBST, the PBSTs. Because my best hope, sometimes it's hard to sit here and think, I want to tell all of our principals to be flexible and talk to their teachers and do it in a way. And I know they're trying. And so my best hope is that we've put these leadership structures in place so that decisions about how to support our new teachers who are struggling and what to take off their plate and how to leverage our veteran teachers who could help them and what should we do for PD this week versus next month, that those decisions are actually being made with teachers and principals in these leadership structures that we've agreed to. How's that going?
I would say that there are buildings that are models for shared leadership, but we still have buildings that have a lot of work where the agendas are very controlled and there really isn't shared leadership, or there are people that are scared to give that control up to a group. What did you say? Yeah, or people are scared to speak up and share what they need because they fear what will happen to them afterwards. And you have the mic, but it's a range of, and we discuss this a lot in our CWG meetings. So we do let leadership know, specific buildings that are seeing more challenges.
Mm-hmm. I think, and I have a great administrator. Shannon Behill's wonderful. But I think some of it too is with the new leadership structure and some of the changes we're making, we're all still wading through what, especially when it is a new initiative that comes from the district, what do those teams have the freedom to do? And what is like, you have to do this. And so that can just be challenging to work through. I think that Shannon does take a very realistic approach, and she does definitely listen to staff and care about where we are and like on implementing things, but also just the workload, the burnout, those kinds of things. So even in that really great situation, I see there's sometimes being just confusion over like, where does the freedom lie whenever they're given a turnkey presentation? What freedom do they have to then say how fast they're going to go in that implementation? Also, there was something else I was thinking about a minute ago before you asked that question.
While you think about that,
Yeah,
I just want
go
to jump
ahead.
in. I do feel like some of our trainings with principals and ARs has helped because sometimes people come back with different perceptions on what was presented. And so it's very helpful to send the slides and to remind them of what was presented on both sides, right? And just to be like, it should be collaborative decision making, and that's best practice in buildings. So I think that that's been helpful in that too. But that's if people are also paying attention.
I remember the other thing. I think sometimes too with the research best practices, there's a lot of different ways that really great teaching can look that are supported by research. And so sometimes, as Whitney said earlier, we're not getting the why. And sometimes we're doing really great things that are research-based, but they're not quite the same things. And sometimes it's based on our strengths. My strength in the classroom 100% is relationships. And I form deep relationships with my students, and I get them to do things because they trust me, right? Other people, it's other things. And so when you're given an initiative that plays to your strengths, it's really easy for you to see how it works and how it fits. And it's easy to implement. But when it's something that maybe is very different and you're not understanding why you're doing it, it just makes it that much harder.
I'm David Holt, he, him, his. I teach social studies at Arvada. I wanted to add to that and kind of address Superintendent Dorland's comments, right? Pedagogy is a philosophy, right? Is a set of philosophy and practices based on hopefully the science of learning. And I agree, many of these things fit within there, and kind of to what Ange was alluding to, getting to those and implementing those practices can be different. I think a lot of what is making people feel overwhelmed, we mentioned the intentional monitoring, circulating in the classroom, looking for specific things. That's normal. That's what we should do. Some of the practices are being handed down as very prescribed, as at this point in the lesson, you are circulating to these specific students with this map and this route and expecting to help them on this particular thing, right? So it's just becoming very prescribed, which for somebody who is very detail oriented and that's them, that might be the way they do it, right? Other people might be more adaptive and do different practices. And so they just don't feel flexible for our individual teaching strategies, our content, the subject. And so, yes, most of these things have, great backing and research as far as, their benefits to students. It's the implementation that's being very rigid and kind of not just the joy of teaching, but also not allowing us to play to our strengths, right? The same thing, exemplars, right, are another big push. We should all know what we expect student work to look like for any task that we're asking them to do. But for me, that might not be writing it out exactly as I expect a student to. That might be me going through and picking out the pain points that I think a student might go get derailed and then adjusting lesson to lesson. For somebody else, it might be drafting the paragraph 3 times so that they see different ways it could be written. And these strategies aren't really accommodating that. They're just, at least the way they're being given to us is that this is the way to implement these practices, as opposed to these practices need to be part of our curriculum, part of our teaching. And here's some ways that we can do that. They're very prescribed and very narrow.
Before I get back to Director Reed, I just wanted to pick up something that Whitney had said to me when we met the other day too, about the why things are happening. Do you think that the why is missing from the school level administrator not telling you enough, or do you think it's the district not telling the administrator, or where do you think the why is missing?
I don't want to speak for everyone, but when you have turnkey presentations that are given to your administrators and your instructional staff, then they turn around and give it to you, the why is not always there. It's the things that we have to do or the things that we need to change. So that we haven't seen the research behind.
Do you ask your administrator? I mean, have you been able to get an answer when you ask?
Our ALT team has. We've asked where's the research coming around the naming the lab, or some of the news or the journal articles that we read occasionally. We have asked where the why is, and it's not clear.
Topic, when you were presenting, when you talked about TNTP, and I don't know a lot about it. I've tried to start reading. We got a presentation at one point. You mentioned it was meant to reform schools. Can you, I think it's really valuable to hear different people describe what it is. Can you describe to me what TNTP is and how it works? Or someone. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to add in, there's a history of organizations like this in Colorado. When I came to Colorado, it was Uncommon Schools that I was trained in New Jersey, and it was all based around charter and private schools. And so these organizations go into underperforming schools, and essentially they say, we can raise your test scores we can change the behavior of the school. We can improve teaching practices by implementing our strategies. And so when I was doing uncommon schools, it was very rigid. Kids were in seats. They had to raise their hand. There wasn't calling out. You had strict management skills within your class and strategies. And so that's very similar to what TNTP is.
So following up on that, I get that, you know, that we would rather use our own people. I do think, you know, whenever we look at a school that's struggling, that one of the really important pieces is giving that school the resources that they need to make whatever changes they need to make. That I've always felt like that's really the main use and the only practical use I can ever see for CMAS is as an indicator of schools that need greater supports and greater resources. Aside from people that are district employees, are there other programs that our teachers would prefer? Is there a way that we can get sort of feedback on other programs that our teachers have been made aware of by their colleagues from other districts or that kind of thing that they might be interested in so that we could explore those possibilities?
I would say I think we need to look at, do teachers need to be told how to teach in their classroom? Do we need resources to teach teachers how to teach in their classroom? I personally don't think so. We went to college for this. However, I think the money could be better spent on science resources, social studies resources. Those are things that we don't have in our classroom. So if we want to prepare for CMAS, we need those resources. I don't have anything to teach science. We make up our own stuff or we buy our own supplies.
So like I would say, you know, for my average day of teaching, college prepared me well for that. I don't know that colleges prepare students well for trauma-informed practices, for teaching kids that are in schools that are in trouble. I think there's other things going on there. So it just seems like whatever that may be to help adjust strategies as needed for those particular kids, that seems like a good investment as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do have some great people who know trauma-informed practices and who could train us. We don't always get the training. And that's another example of what she was saying is we have these amazing people in our district. Like, let them do their thing because they can. And with our schools that are underperforming, which I don't even like that word, we know what they really are, is often under-resourced. In their communities are under-resourced. And we need to ask those communities what it is they need. Quite often, they are working with students who have severe trauma, who may not have enough food. And you know this with many of the students you taught who were struggling with various things because that was your specialty. Mm-hmm. So we need to be asking the schools, what do you need? Because that's where we are going to find out. And they may not know the name of a program, but they know what they need. They know where they're feeling like they're not enough.
Okay. And then the final thing is I do want to congratulate you guys on the work legislatively because we've made huge strides and we continue to make huge strides and we continue to I think, hold our own to the best of our ability. We just had 2 studies on adequacy of resources to Colorado schools, and from that have learned that depending on which study you look at, we're between about $3.5 and $4.5 billion short what we need to be paying in order to truly adequately fund our schools and educate our students. We are making that part of our legislative agenda. the metro area superintendents have been working on legislating or on working with legislators on that as well. I know I don't need to tell you. I'm absolutely certain that you are working on that within JCEA and CEA. But just to reinforce for you that we need all the help we can get. We will be there asking for these things as well. And hopefully we can start to increase our funding to our schools because, you know, compensation is a huge issue. And we're going to see that in negotiations. And part of it is just the constraints of resources. We definitely have to look at how we're spending resources and how we can distribute those and all of those things. I'm not saying that those are not important pieces, but honestly, we need more to make those, to do that distribution. So hopefully that remains a big piece of your agenda as well.
Yes, it will. As a member of the state leadership team also, I'm on the CEA Executive Committee, and I am one of the NEA directors. So like GPO WEP, I've been lobbying on for 4 years. So excited it passed. But yes, definitely. I mean, we joke at CEA that we are now at 1998 funding levels for public education in Colorado. So we definitely would love to partner as well. So reach out.
I want to thank you all for sharing your expertise about initiatives in classroom instruction and management. And I know that that's stressful. And so I'm going to bring the conversation back around to one of your asks being about mental health supports for folks who are in classrooms. And where did I wrote my question back here. Before you came to speak to us, we had a presentation about the RFP, and I know that many of you were in here hearing that, and that there are going to be additional resources through liveandworkwell.com, mental health supports available through health plans. But I want to underscore and maybe give you just another chance to lift up why it is in-house EAP support is particularly helpful, given that we're making an attempt to expand mental health supports through our healthcare plan. And just follow up on that because I know it's an ask that I heard before and when I first got on the board, and so it's here again, and so I want to just ask the question about.
I think one of our biggest concerns with the cuts to EAP is that it is an employee benefit. And one of the reasons that it was cut is so that we could increase HR partners or create an HR partner program. When we asked what HR partners are and their job description, and we were told that it was for more support for our administrators. So we took away a benefit from our employees to give support to our administrators. I'm not saying that our administrators don't need support, but we took a benefit away from our employees, and we need to find a way to make that right. Another one of our big concerns is the outsourcing, right? And here we are. We have an in-house program that benefits our employees, that is a benefit and does serve our employees. They have lots of data that I meet with them quarterly on that they share. And we have in-house people that are doing this. And now we're looking for outside resources to meet our mental health needs. Now, I know that not everybody wants to use EAP, and that's certainly okay. But there is a lot of people that do benefit from it. And many of us have utilized that. So I will turn it over to Richard at this time. But I think that's one of our biggest concerns, is that it was a benefit that was taken away from our employees and that we really would like to have back.
I'm going to make myself really vulnerable here in this room. I'm an alcoholic, and I struggled with my addiction for many years, and I have been sober now for like 2 years. I had sought therapy from Kaiser and from Sondermind, and both just, it was a constant struggle. It wasn't until I went to EAP and sought counseling with EAP that I felt like I was actually seen and I was heard. And I still meet with EAP monthly, and within EAP too, I got counseling for me and my wife too as well, which helped tremendously. And if it wasn't for EAP, the two things I absolutely love in my life are being an educator and my wife. I would not have either one of those, and I'm fairly certain of that too. So it is tremendous, and it has helped me out tremendously.
I want to thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. I want to lift up that I was at therapy today before I came here, and I recognize how valuable it is. And when you find the right provider and the person who does see you and can connect with the issues that you're facing, that support is life changing and life maintaining. And so I want to just say how important I think it is that we hear what our staff is asking for when it comes to having support for mental health. And I think more access from multiple places is better because everybody has a different need and a different fit. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Just to add a historical piece too, the last time EAP was cut was right before Columbine. And once Columbine happened, we fully instated it. So
I would also like to say that EAP is one of the benefits that we have is actually a family benefit at no cost because your spouse can use it and also your children if they're 15 or older. And they've just, as a locally sourced, I mean, I could get some of the help that I needed from Kaiser, but you have to make an appointment, you have to meet their constraints, and they were immediately available to me. 2 years ago, my mother-in-law died, and we were like, what are we going to do with my father-in-law because he has Parkinson's? And I immediately called the EAP, and they called me back within an hour, and it was after 5 p.m. And she was like, what can I do? And I was like, this is what I need. And she immediately gave me a list of places to call with people who would answer my phone call almost immediately. So they were there for me in a crisis, and it was about me, but it was also about my family and our whole community. And because our EAP professionals are local, they can immediately tell you this is what you need.
they also have the knowledge to connect us directly to our health providers. So like when we can't get in for mental health, they can get us in quicker. And so that is another resource that they provide to us. If we meet our 6 to 8 sessions.
I hope our EAP staff get a chance to listen to this so that they hear how valued they are and how much impact that they've had. Thank you. Do you want to follow that?
Brooke, when you just said something about cuts, I got a little confused. Can you say that again? And then I'll ask my question. You said it was something.
Their hours have been cut. Also,
did you say about Columbine and the historical?
Yeah, the last time that we cut EAP, like we had a fully functioning, fully staffed EAP, and then the district decided to cut it and cut back on it. And I don't know. We could ask. I mean, I think John DeStefano was in the audience, but we could ask what that was. But once Columbine happened, I mean, it was like they made the cuts and then Columbine happened and they fully made it fully employed and fully funded again.
And then it's been cut recently?
Yeah, I think in the last 3 years, as soon as we implemented HR partners.
Yeah.
I think it was when Jen Jones started.
That's what I recalled, but when you said it was the last time we cut it was Columbine, I got a little confused that we hadn't cut it since then, but we have cut the program in the last few years. Yeah, and then what kind of level are we at right now?
I would have to look at my notes exactly. I could probably pull it up in my
I can give some general, like the recent, I don't know what fully funded meant in 1999 or 1998 or after. We could pull that history to see what, and I don't know if fully funded means fully funded to a point where everybody needed it, got it. There's something around like the program funding versus the need. And I don't know if those two things ever equated.
Just wondering what we're at.
Yeah, but their hours
Right now
have
we
been
have
cut
like
from,
3, and I think before this we had 4. So we transitioned either 1 or 2 FTE. I don't know the exact number.
Well, in addition, their hours have been cut from 40 to 30. Also, their program manager or office manager has been cut.
How about we get you guys some information because we can pull up what we did share with the board when we went to implement HR partners. In addition to sort of restructuring the number of FTE, we also restructured a bit of their role with crisis support versus employee support, and tried to focus the team specifically on supporting employees. And so there's some context there that I think is important for the board to know. So we can pull up what we've shared when this all happened, and I'm happy to share this during the superintendent JCEA monthly meeting as well, Brooke. And I'll make sure that the board gets the same information. Yeah, we can look at the history, and then we can look at what happened a couple of years ago, look at where we are now, how have the expectations changed, how have the hours changed. And we also, I know, have been pulling data on what's the wait list, is there a wait list? And if so, what is that looking like? What other options are we providing for people who might be on that wait list if there is one? I don't see Amanda here. So, I don't know if you have anything to add, Amanda, but because I just don't know the numbers off the top of my head right now. I know you've been working on this though.
I certainly can add. It might take a little while. I mean, it's quite a bit of different information I would need to pull from different resources. Brooke is absolutely correct. We did cut hours, and so we have a couple of counselors who are 20 hours a week, so they're half-time. We have one manager who is 30 hours a week, and then we have a half-time staff person who works the front desk and does the intakes, and she is half-time there and half-time in our supports our sources of strength students. And so she's actually a full-time employee working half at EAP and half with our central counseling team. And so I can give you, I can pull more numbers, I can pull presentation data in our most recent report data that does show what Superintendent Dorland was just talking about with regard to current utilization and how our employees are accessing EAP right now. And so I'll be able to share that in the Friday report, of course.
When you just said all of those, so we don't have anyone full-time?
Sorry, I'm running through all of them in my head. I think there's one full-time, 1 30-hour, and 2 20-hour that support the EAP and the counseling services that are offered. And to Superintendent Dorland's point, they do participate as part of our crisis response team, most importantly for our adult support, because our central student success team supports our student mental health support during the crisis response. They also used to do a lot of preventative presentations to try to get ahead of the response that may be necessary. They have started engaging in that a little bit more often when asked to do so. But they have to be really thoughtful about the balance of time, because certainly they want to dedicate the majority of their time to counseling for our employees who are seeking that.
When we get an update on this, I would love to have the EAP staff present to us and tell us about what they do and their experiences. I think that would be really helpful for us.
Did you say that HR partners do counseling?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you guys for being here and for sharing your stories. And Richard, thank you for being vulnerable with us. It really does matter. So thank you guys.
I have one last thing I want to just mention. Emote brought up achievement gaps and graduation rate gaps, and I think our district calls on some contractors to help us address how we're going to face some of the gaps. I'm curious from the Emote team, are there things, strategies, resources, practices that Emote wants to see prioritized in the addressing of our achievement gaps and our graduation rates?
we've not done that work as part of emote as of yet, but we can certainly begin to steer ourselves in that direction. Knowing now that you're asking for that information, that's certainly something that we can do and would be more than happy to do.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful perspective, given what you presented, and that the district has a history of having good intentions, but maybe not following through. And I think we need to have some deeper conversations around the how between emote and district staff and the board and community members probably also. So thank you.
EAC is doing a lot of work on that.
Good.
They are.
Yeah. But I want to make sure that emote is feeling part of that conversation. And also wanted to check in with you about the ombudsman experience. Is the ombudsman's been working with emote? Is that accurate? Yeah.
Yes, the ombuds is sort of the go-between between emote and the EAC. He helps guide some of the work that the EAC does. He meets with us regularly to get our input on the agendas for EAC and sort of help guide the work of EAC.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, good. I remember we talked about it when we talked about EAC, so I wanted to check in, with other folks who are working with him just to see how that's going. And I think that's the early mentor part. Can I ask you a question about the mentors? How many pairs of mentors did you have this year in a pilot year?
So we're operating with a pretty small crew this time around because it's a pilot program. We essentially have 10 mentor teachers, 10 paired up with 10 new educators to the district that we sourced from induction this year. As the program grows and we kind of figure out some of the kinks and some of the things that we want to continue to build on, I'm hopeful to see it grow quite well over the next couple of years. But I wanted to keep it small this year just so I could keep it all within my locus of control.
All right. And are they the pairs within the same school building? Is that the idea?
Ideally, yes. Not always possible just due to the amount of mentors who decided they would like to participate in the program. So if it's not school, then it is... I basically polled every respondent and I did like matchmaking, So if it's not that, then it's similar content area, right? Elementary education or similar articulation area, depending on what the mentors and mentees decided they wanted most. So I try my best to just pair them up nicely depending on their wants and needs.
That is thoughtful of you. Thank you. I think my other question is you and I, we can. I would love to talk to you another time, but just like qualifications and how you're getting folks to say yes to being mentors, how you're recruiting. That was the word I was losing. And then I'm curious too about the turnaround. When can somebody who received mentorship then turn around and come back into the program in a mentor position? Is it immediately or is it a set amount of time down the road?
That's a great question. I don't have a specific amount of years or anything off the top. It's weird. I'm in this position now where I'm going into my 5th year and I'm technically an early career educator, but I don't really feel like it anymore, So it's a great question. I'll definitely ponder, but I don't have a specific number in mind at the moment. The common adage that I hear in teaching circles is like you really spread your wings around your 3rd year. So that's what I would be naturally inclined to answer with, but I'd like some more time to think about it to give you a more direct and specific answer.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just, this is really intriguing to me, just thinking back to, maybe I need to couch it in the trauma of my first 2 or 3 years of teaching. And the kinds of support that were extended to me and what was actually helpful were very different. And so I have a personal interest in how we're supporting new teachers, especially because of what Director Reed mentioned about how our educators are trained in education programs. Doesn't always translate to being ready for being in a classroom and being able to manage initiatives and the various things that are coming onto your plate in that first year. And so I want to make sure that folks who are saying yes to this profession are able to stay in it. And I'm deeply interested in how we're supporting new educators. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I just have 2 questions. The first one has to do with the fact that I think, certainly for me, attracting and retaining the good educators and staff is a high priority. So when I hear you talking about the management time, the workload and so forth. Do you have a feeling how we compare, Jeffco compares to other districts around us? Do you hear from other teachers, teach staff, if they're doing better, not feeling as overwhelmed?
Well, CEA also does like a state of Colorado report. And I don't know when they're going to be releasing that or putting it out. Okay, nice. So Ange knows. So they'll be putting that out next week. So we can certainly let you know how we compare statewide as far as workload. As far as the retaining piece, I really do believe that the fact that we've made changes to our compensation has been able to has retained some of our teachers, specifically from retiring early. I've heard that from many of them. Like, I was planning on retiring, but, you know, like, this has kind of kept me going. I don't know, you know, some people should probably retire, but, you know, but some people are, you know, we need them, and they continue to inspire people and do great things. So, you know, I think it's also a really good thing, especially because we know that there are teacher shortages, and we're not attracting people to teaching the way that we used to. So we need to continue to do that and have programs that continue to make our profession attractive, but also funding it. And so I would really hope that the state continues to fund education and not cut it in its budget as planned.
I'm also probably potentially going to say slightly more than I should, but I went through a really rough patch a while back, and I actually got contacted through recruitment. And so I sat there and I was like, well, yeah, let's hear about this, because honestly, sometimes I feel like we as teachers feel like we're tied down, right? And so I was like, sure, tell me about this, because I'm going through a rough patch. So whatever you're going to tell me is going to tell me where I want to go with life. And as I was talking with the recruiter, I was like, so I'd like to look at, you know, maybe some places that are closer to home and things. And I was like, obviously I love Jeffco, so like, you know, it's never out of the cards. And she goes, well, first off, you know, as a recruiter, we wouldn't place you in the same district ever. However, she told me that the feedback that she had received from people that she had recruited was that Jeffco isn't really the place to come to, that the workload makes it very hard. And so that really stuck out to me as like, if she's hearing and working with these other districts that are saying it's more manageable elsewhere, that does stick out to me as really interesting, because she's a completely outside source who isn't even in the weeds of it going, okay, let's hear about this. So that's just
for the record, Ashley's a special educator, so that's why she's being recruited like that.
Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, which leads me to my second question too, because SPED was one of the main areas that you were speaking about negotiating. Even I think it was the first topic, one of the first, maybe second. But I'm wondering, outside of just resources and enough people, what other things are you thinking about in the area of special education?
Honestly, as a special education teacher myself, I would say one of the biggest things really comes down to manageable workload. So we get these differing perspectives every year as our area directors for special ed change over. So for instance, in previous years, I had one who was like, ooh, we feel like most students should be on an IEP. And so we want you to be looking at these instances, giving, you know, the support to these additional students that maybe in the past shouldn't qualify those kind of pieces. And then we also then on the opposite end get the ones who are very compliance based and are like, okay, we're really looking at specifically the IEPs. So depending upon the year, it's almost like you have to shift some of where your focus goes and the timing that goes with it. So for example, I, working in it, don't understand how we are allocated FTE personally. What I can tell you is that we had a director that told us you really should only be doing goals and minutes of what you are specifically working on the goals, not the amount of time that you're working with the kids. So then when we look at that, like our school tends to have lower amount of time written into the IEP. We overserve. However, if we are being allocated FTE based off of our minutes, we are receiving less FTE than probably what needs to be done to staff us. Additionally, you know, it's about those goals. Sometimes we're getting goals that are completely unmeasurable, and we have to sit there and go, okay, let's fix this. Let's do these things. So not only are we walking into situations that it's like, it's not streamlined what the expectations are. So you then have to compensate not only the time that you're supposed to be working with the kids, writing the IEPs, working like with a co-teacher, but then you also have to be really digging into, okay, like how are these working? I've spent so much time with parents in meetings and on phone calls in addition to our annual meetings, just to make sure that these kids are where they need to be and that the parents even understand what's going on. So I keep coming back to time. I'm lucky enough that with the additional, being at the 300 minutes plus the 30 minutes, that has helped. But honestly, in my specific position, I am supposed to case manage. I co-teach with multiple people. I'm still expected to come to our meetings. I'm still expected to co-plan. I'm still expected to plan my own class that's on top of the co-planning. So time, and compensation is always nice, but the time can make or break you.
I would also add, from speaking to certain special ed teachers around the district, I think it's really important to ask them what they need, because many of them spend a lot of time just fighting for the resources that they need within their building or different articulation areas. Also, depending on who their special ed partner is, you know, it differs from who they are sometimes and what they can get. So in addition to time, it's resources. And when they're short people, they're often covering for that position. And then there's false promises of when that position will be filled, or they're basically begging for the compensation, the extra compensation that they deserve. So, and many times we have to file grievances.
Ashley, is that it? Thank you for still being in our district. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. We love to keep in touch, and I think you've learned, you know, everybody on the board has a connection to the schools, either from being a teacher, having kids in school, whatever. So we love to hear from you. Okay, we are going to take a 5-minute break right now. Thank you.
One of the key responsibilities of the Board of Education is policymaking. We create and adopt policies that shape how our schools operate, everything from curriculum decisions to policies that ensure every student feels a sense of belonging. Our policies help ensure consistency, fairness, and excellence across all district schools. We work hard to ensure they reflect our community's values and serve students' best interests while following state and federal laws.
As members of your Jeffco School Board, we help set the vision for our district's future. We work closely with Superintendent Dorland and her staff to ensure that our goals align with our community values and the needs of our students. Whether it's improving academic achievement or enhancing school safety, we're committed to Jeffco's mission of providing a world-class education that prepares all Jeffco students for bright and successful futures as local and global citizens.
School boards are advocates for students, teachers, and schools, whether at the local, state, or even the national level. We work to ensure our district's needs are heard. This includes pushing for adequate funding, better resources, and policies that benefit our students and our community. Advocacy is a critical part of making certain our schools have what they need to succeed in providing the educational experience students deserve today. You can view our board legislative agenda by visiting jeffcopublicschools.org/board.
As a school board, our focus goes beyond just today. It's about the future. We are committed to the long-term planning that ensures the district's continued success. A thriving district where all students can achieve their biggest dreams. From updating facilities to integrating new technology, we consider how today's decisions will impact students in the years to come. Our focus is on sustainability, innovation, and growth for the future of education in our community.
One of the most important roles we have as a school board is hiring and evaluating the superintendent, who serves as the district CEO and is responsible for the day-to-day operations of our schools. We provide the support and guidance they need to effectively lead and evaluate their performance to ensure progress towards our educational goals.
For our next agenda item for study this evening, the board will receive information about the status of the current fiscal year budget and proposed budget revision. The 2024-25 budget was proposed on May 5, 2024, updated on June 5, 2024, and approved on June 13, 2024. District staff presented an amended budget on September 4, 2024. That restated budget reflected the consolidation of various accounting funds, which the board approved on September 12, 2024. On November 11, staff provided an update on the unaudited student enrollment figures and gave a preliminary estimate of how the emerging enrollment data would impact revenue. The board anticipates voting on a revised budget and appropriation as part of the consent agenda on January 16, 2025. Before I turn this over to Ms. Copeland, is there anything you'd like to add, Superintendent Dorland?
Yes, thank you, President Parker. I do want to just begin by recognizing that Mr. Salmons is not with us this evening, our budget director. He's not feeling well. So we are fortunate to have our CFO, Ms. Copeland, here to do the presentation. And I kind of want to just highlight for a second the juxtaposition between the needs of our educators that were just at the heart of the previous conversation with JCEA. Everything from the mental health needs of our employees, the resource needs, the staffing and caseload needs, all of those things are real. And they exist not only in Jeffco Public Schools, they exist in any district that I have ever worked in and districts across this nation. And so, we talk often about how two things can be true at the same time. And the presentation that Ms. Copeland is about to share with us sort of paints the picture of the other side of the coin, right? Which is understanding our needs, grappling with how we work hard to identify resources to support those needs, and at the same time, do all of that within our means. And, you all have been doing this work with me for a while now. And I think we have done a very good job to align to our values of taking care of our employees, providing the resources our schools need to meet the needs of our students and our families, and at the same time, being able to try to manage responsibly to a budget that matches our revenue and our expenditure patterns and trends. And so Ms. Copeland has the honor of, I think, presenting the other side of the coin. And it is very difficult to talk about resources and what is a declining enrollment revenue picture right after having a really rich conversation with talented and veteran educators who explained, I think, in vulnerable as well as just honest ways what the needs of our staff are and our schools. And so I just want to highlight that for the board and for the listening public, and in support of Ms. Copeland as she begins to paint the picture of the other side of the coin, and just the realities that we're all going to work through together over the course of this fiscal year and planning for next fiscal year. So thank you very much for that opportunity. And Ms. Copeland, you can take it from here.
Great. Drew, are you here somewhere? I don't see him. Okay. Oh, he is. Okay. I'm sorry, Drew. Oh, perfect. There we go. Thanks so much. All right. Board members, good to see you. Good evening. We're going to start with the budget calendar, which actually Board Member Parker summarized perfectly. So I do want to highlight at a certain point in this presentation, you'll be comparing amended budget to revised budget to actuals for historical purposes. I think it'll give you some good insight into some of the improvements we've made in our budgeting processes in terms of getting our estimates more finely tuned. So I just wanted to highlight those pieces of the wheel. So when we presented in November, these numbers did look a little different. And so we wanted to make sure to re-present, I don't know if that's the right word, thank you, appreciate it, revisit. and to more specifically be very clear about what was budgeted in terms of enrollment and what our actual audited October count is. So we had budgeted membership of 75,000 students across district and charter schools, and therefore we budgeted a decline of 1,148 students. The actual decline was less than that, which creates a positive variance to budget, but that doesn't mean that enrollment went up, right? Like it's a little bit of it was less down less, yeah. So the actual decline was 544 students. I do want the public to continue to understand and the board to continue to understand that every year for the past 5 years, the actual enrollment has declined. We also presented preliminary data on at-risk student counts. That data did shift. And so I want to highlight a couple things. One, the budget to actual variance is negative, meaning we budgeted 21,980 students, which we thought was, a fair estimate, and it was actually a slight increase. But our actual is 20,589 students. So that's a decline of 1,400. I think when we first started talking to you about these numbers, we actually thought the decline was more. The real decline is more. But we got one more year of carryover that substantively improved these numbers so that it's not as big of a hit to revenue as we were originally thinking it would be in October. And the numbers literally changed the third week of December in terms of going back and forth with CDE. So, but important to know when we make assumptions for next year, because we had this information about the number of carryover students, we're probably going to assume that those students drop off. So just a quick summary of both kind of revenue and expense that I'll be talking through. I'm going to show you an increase to revenue of under 1% compared to the budget, an increase to expense also under 1% compared to budget, and then a use of fund balance that's almost identical to what we had contemplated, very close. So this summarizes a little bit more detail, and we've added a couple decimal points on just that variance, so it adds up a little better visually, because we have some rounding in here when we start talking about $727 million. But again, total program went up slightly, and that's some offsetting movement of the at-risk and the positive variance, so still a decline of the total enrollment. State categoricals did go up, and that was a little bit more than forecast. Sometimes that's like a lagging thing where we find out from the state, okay, here's how they're going to adjust things. So just go with it. UPK is up a little bit. And then specific ownership tax is down a little bit. Local overrides are flat. And miscellaneous fees is up. And we've broken out a little more detail so you can understand what that's about. And so the one thing I would highlight is of the total revenue increase, approximately $4 million of it is interest income. So additional interest income that we weren't forecasting to have. We based our forecast based on what the folks basically at CSAFE, which is one of the public depository institutions, what they said they thought we could expect. Interest rates have stayed higher, which means that we're earning more than we thought we were going to. But I do think, again, little note of caution. I'm not sure that that revenue is going to stick around forever. So. The increase to expense is going to stick around. It is more recurring in nature, and but it's relatively small. And you see that it's salary a little bit in the general fund, and a chunk is transfers. And I'm not going to talk in too much detail on this slide because I present the detail of the separate funds in the following slides. But if at the end of all that you're still like, what's going on with transfers? Let's revisit. Oh, Thanks, Brian. This next slide also has more detail on transfers, but I still am going to talk about the funds in the fund slides because that's the best way for you to see the big picture. But the transfer increases are primarily to childcare and food service. This presents the same figures you just saw. You just saw them by like salary accounts, benefits accounts. This presents it by program. And it's important to recognize that within each program, you have salary accounts, you have materials, you have lots of things that are allocated, sometimes imperfectly, it turns out. So the program allocation sometimes is moving just because we're truing up the way that people are classifying expenses. This is a new slide. This is that historical look at how close are our actuals to our budget. And this goes back 2 years, FY23, FY24, and then of course that last set of columns is current year. Magenta is what was the adopted or amended budget. So that would have been the budget that we set as of May or June-ish. When we amend, it's usually like a minor adjustment, similar to the accounting change. Revised is when we're trying to get closer to how things are trending, and then actual is the yellow bar. So that would have been what actually happened. This is a revenue slide, the next one's expense. What you'll see is actual revenue was within 1.2% of adopted and amended budget each year. In relative terms, that's an immaterial difference. So revenue is basically coming in very close to what we're forecasting. And you can see that. Here's expense. Here, green is the adopted amended, second green is revised, and then blue is actual. And so again, actual general fund expense has been within 1.9% of adopted amended budget for each of the last 2 years. So again, on a percentage variance basis, our actuals are coming in close to our budget. Last year, our actuals came in higher than our revised budget. The prior year, they came in a little lower than our revised budget. On balance, I do think what you're seeing is an indication that our budget should be a good estimate of what's actually going to happen. So I do want to go fund by fund and talk about some changes to your appropriation. And just as a reminder, your appropriation is the total limit of authorized spending, which often includes a little bit of reserve, assigned reserve, to allow for fluctuations. But because we're trying to make the budget as close as possible to an estimate of actual spending, it means our budget figure, we might exceed. Incidentally, that was a little bit of a tough concept for our auditors. And so when they present to you next week, they may or may not mention this. We got there. I want to assure you that Colorado state statute allows, and even CDE documentation suggests, that this is a good way to do things, that your appropriation is larger than your budget. Your appropriation can include assigning certain reserves towards sort of a contingency purpose or allowing for fluctuations in timing, et cetera. So I think auditors are now with me on that. In the Employee Benefits Fund, I do want to note this is the one area where for 2 years in a row now, our actuals have exceeded appropriation, which is technically not okay. So you will be signing an assurances form next week, President Parker, that says we exceeded our appropriation on this fund yet again. I'm sorry, you have to. It is the honest truth. And I say that in part because as your fiscal leader, I need you to understand why I will be adjusting some of the figures you just saw in terms of estimated costs. And that's all they were. They weren't prices, at least for any self-insured plan. I did double check for FY24, which is the year we just finished. The initial estimated claims cost was $22.2 million. The actual claims were $25 million. That's a 15% variance. That's far in excess of any of the variance in any of the other categories of stuff that we estimate. We were using an estimate supplied largely by our broker. The insurer, when you're self-insured, is really just an administrator. They're not an insurer. So either Aetna's our administrator or United Healthcare is our administrator. They make their money regardless. Don't really care what we pay in claims. Again, I will need to budget at a level that's appropriate because twice now we've significantly exceeded our cost estimate. And I can't keep saying to CDE, oh, we'll get it right next time. So I just want to flag that for you all. And we are, for the third time in a row, adjusting up at the revised budget estimated costs.
Is there anything in particular that you could point to that caused this to happen? So wide a gap?
I mean, my honest answer is I think, again, when we pay a claim, we're simply paying doctors who are serving our employees. And it's reflective of what healthcare our employees seeking out and obtaining. There are quite a few drugs that came out on the market recently that are very expensive, and we pay the cost of the drug. Some of those drugs are very helpful for folks with diabetes and other conditions. It's very expensive, and they're relatively new. I also just think costs have gone up a lot, provider costs. And I think it's really important that we talk about we are paying the cost of healthcare, not insurance. Because we're actually, we're just paying for the healthcare itself, plus an admin fee. And so it's kind of this like both and story. Our employees are using more healthcare, and we're paying more per use, both. Yeah, so again, the cost estimates that we will need to budget for need to be steeped in greater reality, AKA a little bit of CFO gloom and doom, sorry. Food nutrition services. So, what you see on this slide is that even with a revised budget, those two blue columns, that revenue is taller than the original amended budget, and expenses taller than the amended budget. So both are going up, however, and the revenue is only going up because we're transferring in more. Well, there's a little bit of a grant in there, but it's relatively small. There's still a gap between the two. The gap, so it's 36.5 to 42.9, and that's because we've increased the transfer. When we talk about a transfer into food nutrition services, what that means is the general fund is paying for our food service in addition to whatever federal and state sources. It means that we're operating in a way where our federal and state reimbursements are not covering our costs. We're taking a step towards that kind of general fund subsidy, but I think it's important to both acknowledge that this is a step towards it. It doesn't solve the whole thing. And there's a continued conversation that I know my colleague Mr. Gatlin and I, wholeheartedly want to have transparently around what is it we can do, potentially differently, better, who knows what, because in the end, every dollar is scarce. And so when it comes out of the general fund, it's coming out of largely a fund that is mostly instruction. So. Childcare, we have talked a little bit about how in the fund consolidation, all of our pre-K activity, so serving 3- and 4-year-olds, has moved into the general fund. All that's left is our school-aged enrichment. School-aged enrichment has a couple things going on. One is we didn't have great line of sight into that as a separate entity when they were combined. And I do actually think they may have been spending a little bit more on actuals than we fully understood. And so some of this is just corrective in terms of seeing trends. The last thing is that second bullet under expense, which I think is a little bit obtuse. I wrote it, I can say that. Sufficient appropriation pending an accounting clarification. So right now there's about 1.2-ish million in an expense that's really an asset write-down I don't actually think we've classified that the right way. And it's the residual assets relating to pre-K that when you move into the general fund, we don't depreciate. We just pay for everything. Even if it's a 5-year thing, we just pay for it right now. We realize the expense, we're done, we don't depreciate. It's not like you don't stretch it out over time. You do in other types of funds, including in this fund. That's proper accounting. I didn't make this stuff up. Personally, it's too complicated. I would have never made it up. And I think that write down actually shouldn't exist, but I need some support in clarifying that. So that may go away, which is really awkward to say, but, you know, keeps it fun. Central services is a really small fund, but we are having to revise up the appropriation in this. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the $261,000 is relating to copier purchases. Property management. This slide was accurate as of last week when we posted it. As you all know, I've been trying to finalize our ACFR and audit and all the different things. In that process, and again, you'll hear a little bit more from the auditor next week, we clarified a multi-year lease that we entered into June 1st of last year. And because we entered into it as of June 1st, we capitalized the whole thing and established a lease receivable for the whole thing all at once. And yet we'd only been in the lease for 1 month. So it's really difficult. It needs to go in this fund. It wasn't originally in this fund. So we need to go ahead and add that in addition to what you're seeing here. So this number is going to go up further. And it's simply because both the revenue and the expense relating to the lease, I believe it's to the Austin Center School for Exceptional Children. I call it the ACES school. Again, matching revenue and expense. Some of that expense is going to be coming out of the general fund. We need to have it in the right place. Thank you. Appreciate our auditors. And we need to classify it the correct way. So we'll get that right. These numbers will look slightly different in your resolution, but I'll be sure to articulate that. That's it. I went pretty quick.
I want to thank you for the presentation, but also I'm wondering, one of the concerns I had or questions is we get presentations like this, which is very helpful, but then when we go to vote on it, it is the resolution. And sometimes I have difficulty matching it back to the presentation. Is there any way going forward, can you get a preliminary resolution that you attach in the future to the presentation we get? Is it possible or not? It's just that I want to make sure I do my due diligence and I know that what I saw is what I'm voting on. Happy to try to forecast that. The other thing would be to repost this same deck alongside of the resolution and call out anywhere where the resolution is slightly different. So I've already forecasted for you that the resolution will be slightly different in the property. Right, that would be helpful. Yeah.
I will call it out in the board docs item that this is changed from the presentation. And I'm happy to repost the presentation.
Okay, that's great.
Would it be possible just to have these presentations on the same day that we're going to vote on them on the consent agenda? Because I also think these presentations would be really helpful for our community. I mean, Superintendent Dorland gave an intro that would be helpful for a broader community to hear. And as we go into negotiations, like everything is about budget, and yet we know at study sessions, like most people pay more attention to the board meeting. So could we have more of these at our actual board meetings when people are really listening, and especially if there's something attached to it that we're voting on consent agenda?
Let me jump in on that.
Okay, because there is a statute component, but yes.
Okay. Typically, just in general, not related necessarily to financial pieces, the board has indicated an interest in studying something with time between the study component and the approval of it on a consent agenda item for staff to answer questions, clarify something that might not be clear, that kind of thing. So I do think there could be times where, the risk in doing that is that it's delayed and we miss a statutory. So if we were to present this next week and the board had a big question about it, that then they didn't feel comfortable approving it, there's a statutory timeline in which the board has to approve the mid-year budget revision. And we would then have to probably scramble and schedule another meeting for the approval by the end of the month, because I think it's January 31st.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the statutory piece you were going to mention, or is there something else, Brenna?
Can I just, yeah, of course, fair. Then perhaps, because I'm thinking about how to be transparent to the community, then perhaps we could have it presented again at a board meeting when it's more publicly available. I wonder what our board thinks about that.
Yeah, I way to go. Sorry about that. But I do agree that most people don't watch our study sessions, and the public is intensely interested in budget. So if we could just do a quick, and with that presentation, I don't even know that we would need, and we didn't spend much time on it anyway, the budget calendar, and we don't need that. The public doesn't need it, but just the most salient pieces, I think, would not be a bad idea.
Even if you just highlighted some of the changes that are coming, and I could do the bit at the beginning to frame it a little.
I also think that if we were to do this in general, always, and have a review of the presentations we have at study groups, then it does make our board meeting longer. And so if we do have a review, or at least the changes, highlighting the changes would be helpful. So a combination to make sure that we cover it in a forum where more people see it, but also follow our procedures, follow the law, get the stuff done in time. And again, for me, it was more a question of, I vote on a resolution and I need to know how to put it together or see it in the presentation.
I am always open, and I do actually think highlights from this could be helpful. I have seen other board staff do what I would call a stand-up version, and it actually makes a difference to have the staff person be standing at the same podium that someone just gave public comment, or right in front of whatever on the order. To do a stand-up presentation, sometimes as short as 5 minutes, 2-3 slides, to say, as a reminder, board, this is what we discussed in your study session. These are the key changes, and I do think that can be really helpful. So I'm open to that. I think the one area where statute gets super prescriptive is around the budget, and we have to present it at least 30 days before you vote on it. So that it is in the public domain, so that people can read it, assimilate it, provide you some feedback. So that part is law, but we can we can certainly summarize it again, before we vote, and we often do present one more time in June when you vote. So I just wanted to highlight that one piece.
Great, thank you, Ms. Copeland. Okay, for our next to last agenda item this evening, the board will receive a presentation regarding the operation and capital maintenance agreement for the Arvada Aquatics Center. Joining us tonight is Kristen Egger from Kaplan and Ernest to discuss Jeffco School's interest in the Arvada Aquatics Center and explain the main components of the operation and capital management agreement prior to the board's vote on the contract next week. Before I turn this over to Mr. Gatlin and Ms. Edgar, is there anything you'd like to add, Superintendent Dorland?
Thank you, President Parker. This has been a long project, and I am happy to share that one of the most joyous messages that I received this weekend was from Patrick Simpson, our district athletic director, who shared photos of Jeffco swimmers in the new Aquatic Center. And it was just very nice to see new aquatic center being used by our student athletes. And we do continue to collaborate with the city of Arvada on how best to manage maintenance and support the ongoing use of the pool, in addition to just making sure that we have priority use. So with that, I want to thank Ms. Edgar for her efforts since the beginning on this project in helping the district and representing us in our interests as we collaborate with the city of Arvada and Apex. And I will be handing this over to Mr. Gatlin. Thank you for being part of our presentation this evening as well.
Thank you, Superintendent Dorland, President Parker, fellow board members. And before we jump into the objectives of the presentation, to piggyback on what Superintendent Dorland mentioned, I did want to show some pictures from the event that happened this last Saturday on January 4th. This was the first large swim and dive meet that we've had in this facility. It was a girls swim dive league relay meet. It included the following Jeffco schools: Golden High School, Green Mountain, Devlin, Evergreen, Wheat Ridge, Dakota Ridge, Stanley Lake, Conifer, Bear Creek, Ralston Valley, Columbine, Chatfield, Lakewood, and Arvada West. It also included Valor because they're in our league, but they're Jeffco schools. But as far as the number of participants in schools that were there, but this is a great picture that shows the built-in seating. And I know you've all been to the site, you've seen it, so you know it. But to see it being used like this is exciting, and has been a long time coming. But it's nice to see it serving that purpose. A few more pictures of just the swimmers in action in the lanes, and lastly, just some of the technology and the Jeffco Public Schools branding and the scoreboard and all of that that is part of that facility. Okay, so the objectives for the presentation this evening is we wanted to review the history and the structure of the related Arvada Aquatics Center Myers Pool agreements. I mentioned in the cover memo, project has been called a lot of things. The official name now is, as you all know, is the Arvada Aquatic Center, but some of the agreements do reference some of the past names. I think it's pretty easy to piece together, but just wanted to call that out. Understanding Jeffco School's interest in the Arvada Aquatic Center, and then discuss the main components of the operation and capital maintenance IGA, which will be voted on at the next board meeting in consent. So, brief history of this. On December 9th of 2021, the board approved a resolution and IGA supporting and authorizing the pool project and the associated lease financing that went along with that. So, for the terms of this presentation and the associated documents, we're referring to that initial IGA as the 2021 IGA, because this gets a little complicated. We're talking about the initial IGA, now we're talking about another IGA. The initial IGA mentions that this IGA is coming. This IGA embeds the initial or the 2021 IGA, so it's a little bit confusing. So I wanted to make sure that we call that out so it was clear in the documents and in the presentation. So in that original 2021 IGA, it outlined the terms of the agreement, and it stated that the following items would be developed at a later time: a priority use agreement, which has been completed, and this operation and capital maintenance IGA that Ms. Edgar will be going through this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to her. And thanks again for joining me up here this evening and all of your work for a while on this project. And I'll hand you over the keys.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here this evening, everybody. Okay, so I think some additional context to this project has actually been in the works and has its origins from 2019, when Arvada, Apex, which is a special district, and the district partnered together to do a feasibility study at the site about what to do with the pool long term. That feasibility study identified that a new structure was the best path forward, and the three entities decided to partner at that time, which is how we come to the set of agreements that we're talking about today. At the beginning, the it was sort of, the parties discussed that the city of Arvada is actually the party of these three that owns the property, the improvements that comprised Myers Pool, and now that comprises the Arvada Aquatics Center. They own that property in what's known as fee simple. If you were to look up in the property records, they are listed as the property owner, and it is still that way. Under the city charter, park property cannot be sold or conveyed without a majority vote of registered electors. So that is why there were, as I understand it, initial conversations about should we have 3 parties own this in fee simple, and that was not going to be viable because of this limitation in the city charter. So this property, in effect, cannot ever be sold by the city of Arvada without going to the electors. And I think, as we all know, and Arvada would probably encounter this too, park property is very treasured by Coloradans, and so they are not usually going to agree to sell it. So that path was never explored, and that's why there is not a real property ownership in either the school district or Apex. In addition, and another complicating factor that actually protects the use of this property in perpetuity is that the city's ownership in the property is subject to what we call a reversionary interest in favor of Jefferson County. And essentially, a reversionary interest, we see them frequently in school properties and other public properties. What it says is, look, city, we're going to give you this property and you can use it for a park. And if you ever stop using it as a park, then it automatically comes back to the county. So in essence as well, that is a perpetual limitation on the use of this property as a pool. And so that's why that's another reason why there wasn't an ownership transfer. And here, I think it actually works to protect the long-term use of the project. It will continue to be an aquatics center and protects the parties involved as their interests may appear. And then the last bullet here, what all of this leads to, because again, the school district as part of this project and as part of their commitment agreed to finance 50% of the construction of the new facility with the city of Arvada. And obviously we wanted to make sure that our contribution was reflected as some kind of equity ownership interest for the life of the pool, where we would get the benefit of that contribution. So as a result of these limitations, we weren't able to acquire ownership in that project through traditional means. Instead, what we have, and this is built in both to the financing documents and then is ultimately reflected in the priority use agreement that the board approved in 2023, is that we essentially have an equity interest in the property by virtue of your priority use to the pool for Jeffco CHASA sanctioned sports for the life of that project. And that is priority use, meaning you get to use it first above all other users to schedule your events. So that's what the priority use agreement is. Let me stop there because I know that's a lot to cover in 4 bullet points. Are there any questions about that? Yeah.
Well, and thank you for going through that. I've heard you say it now a few times, and I find it very, very helpful in understanding what happened. On bullet point 3, when it says revisionary interest in favor of Jefferson County, does that mean Jefferson County schools or the actual county?
No, great question. Thank you for clarifying. It is actually Jefferson County. So Board of County Commissioners, Jefferson County. And that's pretty common. We've worked with other properties in the Jeffco space, and routinely among planning and public jurisdictions here, Jefferson County actually has quite a lot of open space and parks. And so it's frequent that when they partner with the city on this, there's usually a reversionary interest in their favor in order to protect that perpetual use for recreation for your public. But thank you for clarifying. It is not the school district. It is actually the county. Okay. Okay, so going back, and again, I know I'm kind of repeating, but I'm a very visual person. I'm also very linear, so I like to think of things that way. As Mr. Gatlin said, we have a 2021 IGA, which sets forth at a very high level the commitment of the parties to this. That's the school district, Arvada, and Apex to this project. That IGA contemplated that after the construction of the project or late in the construction of the project, the parties would enter into 2 additional agreements. One of those we've already talked about. That was the priority use, ensuring that that equity interest of the district is enshrined in an IGA for the use of the pool. And then the next one was an operation and capital maintenance agreement. And that is what we're presenting here today and going over, and what the board will consider at its meeting later this month. I want to cover that. A lot of this agreement was actually laid out in detail in the 2021 IGA. There's only a little bit of detail filled in, and it's with more benefit of being further along in the project and having a better understanding of what programs, fees, staffing is going to look like now that we're fully built out. So this operation capital maintenance agreement that is before you does align to the 2021 IGA. Essentially what it provides, it lays out a couple of things. It talks about maintenance in terms of scale. Who's going to do the daily maintenance? Who's going to do the annual maintenance? And what type of scale of maintenance, who's going to be responsible for that? So Apex, as a special district that does recreation programs in this jurisdiction, they're going to operate this pool. They're going to staff it. They're going to develop the programs. They're going to set the fees. And that means, too, that they're responsible for maintaining this facility on a daily basis. That means having the right equipment, having qualified people who are there. All of that will be them. There will be an annual look by all the parties have representatives that are going to meet annually to talk about this facility and evaluate whether it's safe, what the needs are, what do we need to update. So on an annual basis, for expenditures that are non-capital, meaning they're less than $25,000, Apex is going to be responsible for that as well as part of their budget. Also, the parties are Arvada is going to do an annual kind of assessment as to what equipment may need to be updated. And they're going to do a every 5 year structural assessment. And the parties will sit down together and through their representatives, we'll look at that and we'll try and determine who's going to be taking care of what expenditures are non-capital, meaning less than $25,000 and are those of Apex, and what expenditures are capital, which means $25,000 or more. For the capital expenditures, which are $25,000 or more, the parties are going to cover those. And initially, Arvada, because they are the one with the true traditional real estate ownership interest here, they are putting together a capital reserve fund in the amount of $1.5 million. That will be funded no later than December 31st, 2026. The reason we're waiting until that date is because the parties are under a 2-year construction warranty for the facility. So for anybody who has built something through contractors, you know that for an initial period of time, if there's a defect, you go back to the contractor and the contractor is going to cover that, as are your different kinds of insurances. But after that time, Arvada is putting together a reserve fund to the tune of $1.5 million, and that will be the initial source if there are going to be capital maintenance, repairs, replacements, things of that nature. After that is exhausted, and if that is exhausted, then the parties will contribute equally to any capital repairs. Like I said, other than those capital repairs, everything else will be done by Apex. And Apex then, if you look at this agreement too, there's a lot of provisions regarding their operation of the project. And the main thing there is that they're going to operate it. They're going to make sure it's adequately staffed with appropriate licensed qualified individuals. They'll be setting program fees and they'll be responsible for all of that. Those are the highlights of the agreement. Again, it aligns in some ways when you look at it, aligns very much and may seem redundant of what's in the 2021 IGA. That's actually a good thing. It means that a lot of the predictions in the feasibility report are consistent with what we're seeing now. And there's a lot of boilerplate in there that's just standard for IGAs. With that, I will stop and see if there are any questions about that.
Thank you for this. It's always good to go through this, and we appreciate it because this is something that has been ongoing and can be a little complicated. A few quick questions. In our annual meetings, I assume, Mr. Gatlin, are you our representative?
I probably won't be our representative, okay. But it'll be somebody in our facilities construction team.
Okay, perfect. Do our facilities and construction teams have a good sense for the costs in the life cycle of a pool, such that we can think 5 years out? I don't think it's going to be in 2 years, but 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out. Are we starting to think about how to build some of those maybe significant expenditures into our longer term capital planning?
Yeah, that's something that we're going to take a closer look at, especially we have about a 2 year period where we know we aren't going to be incurring costs, in addition to a time beyond that where this initial $1.5 million. So we have a little bit of time to figure that out, but that is the thinking that we're working on a plan to ensure, and really working that plan in parallel with these review processes and cycles that Ms. Edgar mentioned, where we're doing assessments, where we're trying to identify issues that may come up, and then making sure that we can plan accordingly through the budgetary lens.
I think that's really wise. I think in those initial couple of years, as we're working with Apex, who I know runs many pools, I think leaning into their expertise as to kind of what those life cycle timeframe. If we know we're going to have to replace, I'm not a pool expert, the floor, the concrete, the walls, what those life cycles look like and what those costs are, and that way we can be prepared.
To be honest, this part of it is the only thing that gives me pause. Even if we could somehow address this, and I honestly do not know what the effort is to make changes to this in any way and who has to be involved, but I think even if we just explained that we're aware that that amount will expire, be used, we think at some point, and anything that the district is thinking about how to put it into our capital plan, but I can just imagine the board 15 years from now going, why didn't the board who signed this contract or approved this contract think about this? And so it does give me a lot of pause on this version.
Sure. And if helpful, I didn't highlight this. There is, again, the parties work in cooperation, and even though Apex is running it, they form this sort of like group, and everyone has an equal vote and say in the ongoing operation and maintenance of this facility. And again, part of the agreement contemplates that there will be a third party, presumably a pool expert, right? Arvada takes the lead in hiring someone, but I'm assuming they'll get someone qualified who will do this annual assessment. So it won't be just some random person. It'll be someone who has expertise and is saying, okay, here are the things that we see needing to be replaced immediately. And then we'll have this 5-year structural thing, which will hopefully, my assumption is, and we can, I think, help as part of this group of people making decisions, we can certainly articulate that we're looking for some guidance on how to plan this out. But we will have these independent assessments explaining what needs to be replaced. And then the capital expenditures, repairs and replacements, and emergency expenditures, repairs and replacements go to a vote of the three parties. And so it is somewhat a democratic process, and there's within that then checks and balances, I think, to encourage good conversation among the three about how they're going to spend their limited resources with regard to this facility. It's also really hard. We are all three governmental entities, so we are all subject to TABOR and the limitations on being able to budget out multiple fiscal year expenditures. So sometimes these IGAs reflect that in not being able to plan that out, but that's certainly helpful to hear. And I think many things are done as we get fewer and fewer resources to share among public entities. It is very common to have public entities cooperate. This isn't a guarantee, but at least in my experience, there's usually a good spirit of cooperation and good faith in that endeavor. Thus far, I think there has been that just in my involvement with the representatives for Apex and Arvada. My hope is that would continue. Everyone has, it's to everyone's benefit to work together to ensure that this partnership is a success and that this facility, it meets the needs of all the parties' constituents. So hopefully through that, it's a good relationship and there can be those conversations that you talk about.
Is there any way to capture what you just said in a way that we can put into the document or an addendum to it or anything? Again, I'm like 15 years from now, like, how will they know what you just said?
Well, I do think it's embodied. It's embodied in the IJ itself, which is specific, but it's also flexible. And then in any kind of agreement among parties, there is an implied duty of good faith and fair dealing. And so that's going to be there for future generations because of the way it's set up, which is to have the three parties be meeting pretty routinely to talk about the facility from an operations and maintenance standpoint. I think there is going to be that continuity through the organization. We can certainly talk with them, though. Among the group of three who are initially the representatives who talk, it's possible, I think, for them to sit down and say, how can we put together something that will ensure continuity among our successors around these conversations. And, that's something we could explore whether Apex and Arvada would want to do that. I would think they would want to.
Is that something that the board would like for Kristen to do on its behalf?
Yeah, if it's feasible. If it doesn't put in jeopardy any of the timing schedule that we're on.
Okay, that sounds good. I can raise that with the council and we can take that forward, council for the parties, and we can take that forward to see if there's interest. Thank you.
I have a question too about Apex. You said is the one responsible for setting fees and program costs and so forth. So they could raise fees. Do they get the benefits, the profits from any fees that come into the Aquatic Center?
They do. So they set their program fees to cover their costs, much like any kind of other governmental entity. There's limitations like other governmental entities on their ability to capture and make significant revenue. So yes, they get the program fees. The program fees are going to turn around and are going to fund their costs from operating the project, but they get to keep all of those.
Okay, but there's something in statute or in the IGA we're signing that would prevent them from being a bad actor and just making a lot of money on the center?
Yeah, so the program fees are tied to the feasibility report. So they are limited to a certain extent to what's in the feasibility report. They've already, I think, had to make some adjustments just because costs have gone up and things like that. But they are tied to what's in the feasibility report. Beyond that, I am not an expert when it comes to special districts like Apex. So again, I'm just going on my sort of general knowledge about limitations on government spending generally, but they can't, because of Tabor and other laws, they can't raise fees significantly such that they're earning a huge profit and not being held accountable for that.
That's good because going along with Dr. Varda, 15 years from now, if it turns out we have 3 partners in here and one of them is sitting pretty because they got a bunch of revenue during the 15 years and the other 2 have to put in the costs for some maintenance that is significant.
Yeah. Understood.
I just want to say I'm super glad that Brad Rupert is on the Arvada City Council, former board member here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and that brings us now to the last item on our agenda. The board will hear a preview of the January 16th action items, including items that will be included on the consent agenda. The superintendent will also provide the board a preview of upcoming board agenda items. I'll now hand it over to Superintendent Dorland.
Thank you, President Parker. Let's start with the preview of action and consent agenda items for next week. And please note that some of the content may change and the budgets are estimates and may appear differently per Brenna's presentation tonight when the January 16th agenda is posted. There will be an approval of a donation in the amount of approximately $53,000 by the Parmalee Elementary for Parmalee Elementary by the Parmalee PTA. It is for an outdoor classroom kind of shade structure that they plan to use and put in place near their playground. There will be an approval of the resolution for the adoption and appropriation of the revised budget per tonight's presentation that the board studied with Ms. Copeland, and a second resolution that would update the authorization to use a portion of beginning fund balances for the revised budget. Per Brenna's presentation, there's not a huge difference in the amount of appropriated fund balance that the board will approve, but we do need to make sure that it's updated and accurate, given that you're revising the budget mid-year. The approval of medical benefits contract will also be on the agenda. You studied that this evening. And the approval of the IGA that, we just talked about with Ms. Edgar and Mr. Gatlin for the operating and capital maintenance agreement for the Arvada Aquatic Center. You will have, again, as you always do, typically supplemental funds notification, and you can see what the January awards are for and the amounts associated on the right-hand side of that table. There are 2 capital projects. One is the high school bleacher replacement at Chatfield and Green Mountain High School, and the other is the Ralston Valley High School parking lot repaving. I have almost taken out 1 or 2 of my tires in that parking lot, and I know Mr. Gatlin probably has as well, given that he's not only our chief operating officer who tours around to our schools, but is also a parent who travels to, I know, games and events at that school often. Their parking lot needs it. So those are the 2 on capital projects on the consent agenda next week. Are there questions before I move on to reviewing upcoming agenda items? Great. Upcoming agenda items. So you will have at next week's regular meeting some awesome time with our Jeffco Student Leadership Board. They'll be here for an hour. They're very excited to talk with you. And you might want to think about what questions you want to ask them as we go into next week. We have a legislative update with Mr. Bowditch. You will hear from our auditors, as Ms. Copeland mentioned earlier tonight, and review the ACFR. And you will be hearing from Mr. Polero around our Narcan project initiative, and also a presentation so that the board can be aware of the most up-to-date Colorado statutes related to Narcan. The next day, you will have a special studies. The board has scheduled a special study session where you will be looking at monitoring reports 3.2 and 3.4, as well as monitoring report 1.1. In February, the board has scheduled a study session with, again, a legislative update. The Jeffco negotiations team, our district team, will be presenting to you and talking with the board about our 2025 collective bargaining process and the district's interests in the process with our associations. We will be talking about the boundary study follow-up related to the Jefferson articulation area. We will be looking at, Ms. Reed will be looking at secondary ELA curriculum and the ERP contract, part 1. That will be a part of your study session. And at the regular meeting, you will have some consent agenda items in addition to the board having 20 minutes for public comment dedicated to negotiations and our association partners. We will be looking and studying High School Reimagined, having a DAC dialogue, and the ERP contract. And then you can see March and April. I want to highlight a couple of things. In March, we'll be talking more with the board about the Strategic Capital Master Plan. I know that's been of interest. We'll have an update on our SAE, school-aged enrichment programs, which has been a specific request of the board. And again, the public comment dedicated to negotiations will continue in March, and your board committee, TDPAC, will be coming to talk with you. And then in April, you can see some of the things here. Another opportunity to engage with the Jeffco Student Leadership Board is a highlight there, and another request of the board. And I think many in our community are excited about the environmental sustainability presentation in April. And then finally, another board committee engagement with CAC in April, and monitoring report 1.4. So, and of course, the dedicated public comment for negotiations again. So those are some highlights and updates for the board related to next week's consent agenda items, as well as upcoming agenda items.
Any comments? Yeah.
Just really quick, I think we're all starting to get letters asking the board to make some sort of statement about protecting our immigrant students and their families. And so I think that that is something that we should be talking about formalizing. I just passed off a question today, and I haven't had a chance to read the answer. I did get something about protocols for students if they are encountering ICE, how the schools will handle that.
Could those be sent to all board members, please? Thank you.
And then just to keep it on our agenda, I know our community is waiting to hear from us about our current policies for student safety, especially with regard to what our policies are in hiring and screening, and in how we're educating our children to protect themselves. So those were things that really came to the surface yesterday. I want to make sure that we keep those on the table.
I think we may find ourselves, I don't know when, but in a position where we do need to add time for debate and discussion regarding future activities around that. So
I will say too, we are going to have a retreat in February. So in that retreat, we can also talk about what we want additional in the scheduling, if anything. So we could look at that. Any other comments?
Tonight we talked about the EAP program. Is the board interested in having a presentation on that program in particular and having the staff come and present to, speak with us? Can we put that on a future agenda? And also, I had 3 and I've forgotten the second one. The 2 schools that I don't see that anywhere, and I know I ask a lot, like what's the next step with that, but there's nothing on here, and I know I think it's of the board's interest to work on next steps with that soon. The 2 schools that we need to figure out about building.
Yeah. So Lisa has an update about that, it looks like. So
yeah. So we for the second school, the Green Mountain, we're still pursuing a demographic study that we will do in the city of Lakewood, as we did with the city of Arvada. We'll be conducting that this spring, so we'll have something further on that in June, and then we're trying to determine right now what action is needed by the board related to the recommendation that was made by CAC, I think, in the December meeting. So we'll be back to you on that. We're just trying to figure out what the next right step is.
How long do you think it will be before we know what the right next step is?
I think we're hoping to know that this month or early next month, at least on the Arvada site.
Okay. And then I'm curious what the board thinks about the expectation that the community, I'm sure, has at our next week to discuss the events of the last few weeks specifically. And I would assume that would come as an update from the superintendent on what's happened and series of events that allows the public to understand this. I can't imagine personally having a board meeting where this is not brought up. And I wonder what you all think about that.
I will say I do expect the public comment will have a lot to do with that. So if there are additional pieces of information, any updates, any advice, I am working with, working on, I guess I should say, having some kind of an executive session next week too. If we had that before the public meeting, that we could have questions answered for ourselves, at least we get our legal questions answered. That would be maybe helpful before public comment comes. But then I don't know, Superintendent, if you have any other ideas.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to provide an update in the public meeting. I'm not sure, given what's going to happen between now and then with law enforcement, how much more I'll be able to share other than what has already been shared in writing with our community and our staff. But I'm happy to schedule that. I can even make that part of my superintendent comments. And we have in the past, President Parker, if you recall, moved board and superintendent comments to the front of the meeting right after public comment. So, I mean, we can do that. I'm not sure. It's not going to be, it may not be extremely satisfying for people who come to public comment, given that neither myself nor any board member may be able to address every single concern that is presented in public comment. So I wouldn't want to set the public or the board up for expectation that I'll be able to answer all of the concerns in my comments, but I would be happy to do that and just offer to the board a consideration of moving that up in the agenda.
I think something that you could add, I personally don't expect you'll have a whole lot extra to add, but I do think even if you said the same thing and said there's no new updates, we're keeping you updated, and even talk about supports that we've deployed to schools, and I think that could be maybe something you could add in addition to, I mean, I'm going to look to you guys to know if there's anything to say there or not, but I do think the idea of us being able to almost do what we did in the retreat and speak to it and how we're doing and what we're thinking about, we likely will not be able to answer the questions people have, but I do think people are expecting us to talk about it, and I would support moving it up. And I would be willing to say in my comment, like, I know we're not going to be able to answer all of your questions, but we are hearing you. We understand what you're saying. I think even that in itself has value.
Thank you for working on the executive session, because this conversation, like what we can say and how we can say it and what we can expect, like, to me, there is, and we've been told directly that there's legal implications for what we say. And this is where I remain confused by the implication that what we say could have a legal implication, or the suggestion. So this is one reason why I would like to have some guidance from the legal lens on what it is that is worrisome in that area, because we have not been given any guidance on that. And so that's why I think that would be helpful to even do before a very public meeting if possible.
Okay, any other comments, questions for the good of the, whatever they call it, of the order? Thank you. I knew you'd know. All righty then. That brings us to the end of today's agenda, and we will stand adjourned. Our next scheduled meeting of the board is a regular meeting scheduled at 5 p.m. on January 16th at the Ed Center.